Hello everyone, welcome to What If Luffy Reincarnates in the World of Naruto Part 3. Before we start, please go support Javier Ramirez 042 for writing that awesome fanfic. Now let's begin. This is the translated version I made. There will be some wrong he or she calling here because it's translated, so let me clear this. Luffy is a male in this story. Chapter 24, Dealing with an Uchiha. The sound team looked at Lee with a frown and Sakura asked him, "Why are you here?" "Don't worry, Sakura-chan, I'll always appear when you're in trouble," Lee said with a big smile. Sakura looked at him in amazement, and Nami said with a smile, "Thanks for your support, Lee-kun. You're very similar to Luffy in that aspect." Lee smiled at her in a friendly manner and Sakura said shyly, "Well, thank you, you saved me. As I said before, I will protect you with my life," Lee told him with his classic bright smile. Sakura saw him with wide eyes and remembered when he said those same words to her when entering the exams. The one with the bandages laughed mockingly and said to Zaku, "Zaku, you can go get the Uchiha, I'll take care of that green fool." He threw the scroll they were carrying at him and charged at Rock Lee to eliminate him. "This big-browed guy has a pretty good grasp on hand-to-hand combat. This could be fun," he thought mischievously. Sakura threw a kunai at him to contribute to the battle, but the one with the bandages only dodged it to head towards Lee. But the Sujoutas only hit the ground with a kick and picked up a huge piece of stone that he kicked to throw it towards his enemy. The one with the bandages saw this with open eyes and put his arm in front of him to use the sound to destroy the stone. When it was destroyed, he looked at Lee, who was smiling hugely. "There is some trick in your attacks, right? I'm not just going to avoid them," Lee said with a big smile. Robin had been analyzing the bandage guy's techniques since the start of the battle, when he realized what it was. "Wait, Eyebrows-san, I already know what his ability is about." Everyone looked at her intently, but it was Brook who continued to explain. "He uses sound to fight, and when an opponent approaches him, he sends an air vibration that affects the eardrum of his target, and thus loses his balance. Thus, his opponents remain motionless and ready for his next attack." "How did he know?" thought the one with the bandages without being able to believe it. Zaku and his partner Kin were also speechless at the fact that a strange skeleton had discovered their leader's attack system. "Even if they know how I fight, it will be of no use to them if they don't have a way to deal with it," said the one with the bandages mockingly. Lee looked at him seriously and thought, "I have to take a risk. I will crush each one with all my power." Nami looked at Lee with concern and said in her role as a leader, "Usopp, Frankie, Jinbei, go and help Lee-kun in this battle." "At your command," the three of them shouted. With that, the trio stood next to Lee, who looked at them in surprise and got into a battle pose in front of the sound crew. Meanwhile, in a nearby area of the forest, Luffy and his two wings were returning while the captain was saying, "At least we got a scroll. Now we must return to the tower and finish this test." His two companions acknowledged him, and thus increased their speed to reach where their companions were. Back with Lee and Nami's group, the sound crew was looking at the four in front of them with a complicated face while the one with bandages was thinking, "Damn, our mission was to fight the Uchiha for Orochimaru-sama's plans, but this is a problem with these four fighting against us. We will have no chance to carry out our mission." But he looked at his companion with some signs in his eyes and she understood what he meant. While this was happening, they were seen by Shikamaru's team, which had arrived in search of a scroll. Everyone was looking at each other warily for a few seconds, when Nami noticed something that worried her. "Where is your partner?" she asked, noticing the girl's absence from her. But they heard Sakura's scream, and when they looked at her, everyone could see how the sound girl had the pink-haired girl by her hair and said with an evil smile, "Hair brighter than mine. Poof, are you trying to be a hexy ninja? If you waste that time taking care of your hair, then train, pig." Then he looked at his companions and said, "Zaku, go and kill that Sasuke in front of her eyes. Now that we have her hostage, they won't be able to attack us easily. We will teach you the first lesson." "Ah, good idea," Zaku said with a malicious smile. "Sakura-san," Lee shouted in fear. Nami watched this with gritted teeth and looked at Robin with a nod, which she did as well. The brunette made her classic sign and hands appeared on the sound girl's body of her, which scared her. What is this? Why are there hands appearing on my body? She screamed in terror. One of her hands grabbed the arm holding Sakura's hair and squeezed it tightly, causing her to let go. When the pink-haired girl was free, Nami moved quickly and pulled her away from the sound girl, while shouting, Jinbei-chan, take care of them. Jinbei agreed and proceeded to use his fishman karate against the other two of the sound team. But the one with the bandages took the patch from his companion while he said, We are not idiots enough to fight against all of you. For that reason, take the scroll and let us go. Everyone looked at him with frowns, when a voice behind them said, It seems that cockroaches are as sneaky as I thought. Everyone turned to see that boy named Niji Hyuga looking at them on the branch of a tree with his partner Ten by his side. This scared the three of them a little, and the one with the bandages said, We don't want problems. We have only come for Sasuke-kun and nothing else. Niji, who was watching them with the Byakugan activated, noticed something on the tree and said with a wry smile, Hell, looks like they're going to get what they want. At these words, everyone turned to the tree and saw how a certain black-haired man came out of it with a strange smile. Sasuke-kun? Sakura asked while looking at him with some fear. The sound girl looked at him with fear too, and Ino, seeing him, thought with fear, Is that Sasuke-kun? Nami looked at him seriously, because she had learned the observation haki from Luffy and Sanji, and was noticing a very evil presence emanating from the Uchiha. He looked at his team and shouted at them, Everyone, stay alert for the Uchiha, something tells me that he has become more dangerous. Then, Sasuke finally appeared before them, and they all saw how there were strange marks all over his body as if they were black flames. The Uchiha looked around and then looked at himself as he said, This power that flows through my veins. It's great, I feel great forks now, I have the power I wanted, he gave it to me. I finally understand. I am an avenging Uchiha, an elite one even if I eat the devil fruit. I will get a part of that power. Everyone saw him with open eyes and Nami thought, This is bad. That strange mark must be doing something to him. His ego and arrogance have grown too much, and I fear he will become a much bigger problem for us. We better keep him at bay until Luffy arrives. The guy with the bandages looked at Sasuke seriously and thought, I see. As I thought, the mark on her neck has been activated. Sasuke looked at the sound trio with an evil smile and said, Now, which of you will be the first victim of my great power? He looked at the guy with the bandages with eyes full of malice, and he could see the same look of his master, Orochimaru, reflected in them. This is, I thought in fear. But his partner Zaku performed a hand seal and shouted, Dosa, there's no need to be scared by this weird guy. No, Zaku, don't release him, Dosa shouted in anger. But Zaku extended his hands towards the Uchiha and shouted, Ultimate Zankouha. Instantly, a huge explosion erupted all over the place, sending most people flying. When everything cleared, Zaku looked at the spot where Sasuke was, finding it empty, and said with a sly smile, Heh, I blew it away. You snitched on who? Said a sinister voice behind him. Zaku turned around with his eyes open to see how the Uchiha smiled evilly at him, and hit him in the face with his arm, sending him away. Dosa saw this seriously and tried to go after his partner, but the Uchiha performed several hand seals and blew several fireballs that headed towards the two. Don't think so much. I'll just blow them up, Zaku shouted furiously. He used the devices in his hands to send a blast of sound, but he watched with wide eyes as flaming shurikens appeared from the fireballs. Shurikens on fire? I thought in disbelief. The shurikens hit his entire body and instantly, the Uchiha appeared beneath him at high speed with an evil smile. Zaku, get down, Dosa shouted angrily. But Zaku couldn't do anything as Sasuke was behind him with his arms held in a position ready to tear them off his body. Everyone watched this with wide eyes and Nami thought seriously. This fool is succumbing to that strange seal. If we don't do something soon, we'll be in trouble. Sakura looked at Sasuke with fear and then remembered what that Orochimaru guy told her in the forest. Sasuke-kun will look for me. Zaka looked at the Uchiha with fury and he only smiled maliciously at him as he said, He, are you proud of these two arms? Saying those words, he began to pull on poor Zaka's arms, who began to scream in pain. Everyone opened their eyes at what they were seeing, and at that moment, a hand rested on his arm and a calm voice said, That's enough, Sasuke. Everyone was open-mouthed as they saw who had stopped the black-haired boy, and Sasuke looked at him with a frown as he asked, So you've come, damn dope. Luffy just squeezed the hand that was holding Sasuke's arm and forced him to let it go once and for all. When he managed to separate them, the black-haired man looked at the member of the Sound to say, Take your team and leave. You better continue your way to the tower if you want to do it to the next test. The bandages boy only acknowledged, but took out a roll of his clothing as he said, You have saved me, and as a thank you, I leave you the roll we have. We'll find the ones we need along the way, but I feel I must give you ours as payment for saving me from your companion. Bye-bye. And with that, he took his companions and disappeared from the place. Luffy just took the scroll and put it in his trench coat calmly, but he heard Sasuke's shout from him, saying, Hey dope, how come you show up and get in my way? And why do you keep the thing if I'm the one who should have it? Luffy just walked over to Shikamaru's team and gave them the scroll while saying, Here you go. I guess you haven't gotten one yet. We already have the one we need and we're going straight to the tower. Shikamaru took the scroll and said with a yawn, Well, we better get to the tower to at least get some rest. You only think about rest or clouds, Luffy told him mockingly. At least I don't think about meat all the time like you do, the Nara replied with a frown. Did someone say meat? Choji asked, eating a bag of meat. Some laughed at this, but then, Sasuke's shout towards Luffy could be heard. Don't ignore me, dope, have I asked you why you get in my way and why you always try to get on top of me? Luffy just looked at him neutrally and said seriously, Sasuke, you're acting like this because of what that snake did to you. You need to calm down and wait until we get to the tower so they can help you. Luffy is right, Sasuke-kun. You are acting very strange and they must help you. Let Luffy help you get to the tower and let them help you, said Ino, agreeing with the black-haired man. Sasuke gritted his teeth and increased his evil chakra as he shouted, I don't take orders from anyone, I'm an Uchiha and I'm the elite, I won't take advice from the Dobe or anyone else. I already said that you'll have to answer my questions, Dobe, and you're also going to give me all your power. But the captain only remained calm at his words, and with a sigh he said, I have every right to refuse to tell you anything. The best thing would be for us to go to the tower and tell Kakashi and Knight about what happened so that they and Hokage Gigi can help you. Sasuke gritted his teeth and launched himself with a burst of chakra towards the black-haired man while shouting, I already told you that I don't follow your orders, Dobe. He threw a punch at the captain's face before everyone's astonished gaze, but Luffy just dodged it with great ease while saying lazily, Very slow. The black-haired man fell backwards to the Mugiwara and launched another blow towards his teammate's head, thinking that he wouldn't see it coming. However, Luffy moved his head again without looking back, to everyone's surprise, and Niji said with absolute surprise, How could you avoid it? He does not possess the Byakugan, nor the Sharingan. She has avoided him without looking at him as if he had eyes on her back. Sasuke was stunned at what was happening, and the captain just looked at him sadly while saying, Forgive me, but I must do this for your own good. He covered his fist with armor haki, which surprised everyone when they saw how his fist turned black, and Luffy delivered a powerful blow to the Uchiha's face that sent him crashing into a large number of trees, destroying them in his wake. Everyone was open-mouthed at such a scene, and Luffy just let out a sigh as he said, I'm really sorry, but I had to do it. That evil chakra covering Sasuke was increasing more and more, and I had to hit him to calm him down. Right now, the evil chakra has vanished, and he's back to normal, although I also feel that he's unconscious. Will he be okay? Sakura asked, a little worried about the black-haired boy. Ino just approached Luffy and said with some nervousness, Well, at least you managed to calm him down. I don't know how the front looks, but I think you did the right thing. It was obvious that Sasuke-kun didn't want to listen to anyone, and it took someone to defeat him to calm him down. I think you did the right thing. Shikamaru looked at her with some fear and asked, "Who are you and what did you do with Ino?" "Hey, I'm not that stupid either. Even I can see when something is right, and when something is wrong, and I know that Luffy acted well since he managed to calm Sasuke-kun down. Do you agree with me or not?" Ino said, offended. The Nara could only sigh as he said, "Problematic." Then Nami looked at Luffy as she said, "Do you have the scroll yet?" "Yeah. I already have the scroll we need and I have been able to calm Sasuke down. We can now go to the tower to wait for the third test." Luffy responded with a smile. "Good. In that case, take the Uchiha and let's go to the tower so we can finish this test," Zoro said with some annoyance. Then, Luffy looked at the rest and said, "We'll meet at the tower. I know that they will pass this test and reach the tower. We are waiting for you there." And so, the captain picked up the unconscious Uchiha and then told Sakura that they would go to the tower, and that he would explain everything there. Team 7 disappeared from the area, leaving the others speechless about what had happened. Chapter 25: Arriving at the Tower. On the other hand, Hinata was with her team while they were looking for someone to get a scroll, when they felt something near them. "Stop!" Kiba shouted seriously. The three of them stopped at a tree and Kiba began sniffing the area. "I smelled the scent of sand and some water," he said. Shino was with his eyes closed and said, "There are about 6. Hinata looked forward and making a sign said, "Byakugan." With her Dijitsu, he managed to see that they were Gaara's team and Kiri's team, motionless in front of each other. She deactivated her Dijitsu and said, "It's the Suna team against the Kiri team. I guess there's nothing wrong with seeing what happens." "Will it be safe?" Shino asked seriously. "There's no need to fear. We must obtain a scroll to be able to go to the tower, and if we have a chance with those teams, we will get it." "Let's go," said Kiba with a smile. The three of them went to where Gaara's team was, and when they arrived, they found a complicated argument between both villages. "Give us the scroll, idiot," said the leader of Kiri's team. Gaara just stood there calmly as his teammates kept an eye on their opponents, and after a while, the leader of the Kiri team gritted his teeth as he said, "You are going to die." "Enough talk and do it, old man from the Rain Village," Gaara said with contempt. Kankuro looked at his brother with a drop of sweat and said, "Gaara, it is better to get information first. If we have the same scroll, then there is no need to fight. Fighting without meaning is—" "It doesn't matter," Gaara said suddenly. The Rain Shinobi looked at him with a frown and Gaara continued in a dark tone of voice, "They looked at me funny, so they're going to die." Everyone looked at him with wide eyes and Kankuro thought with anxiety, "That's why I don't like going with him." The Rain Shinobi smiled arrogantly and taking out a straw umbrella, he shouted, "Bah! Then hurry up and do it, here we go." He threw several straw umbrellas into the sky and, making a hand signal, shouted, "Die, Rat Ninpu, raining needles." From the umbrellas, thousands of needles were shot towards Gaara's team as if they were controlled. "There is no escape from this jutsu. It's controlled by my chakra to go straight to my target," the Kiri Shinobi shouted with an arrogant smile. The needles fell on top of Suna's team and Kiri's team leader saw this with a big smile as he thought, "Hey, too easy." But he was shocked to see that in front of him there was a kind of sand dome protecting the Suna team. Gaara looked at the shinobi from the rain with a neutral expression and said, "That's there? No way, not even a scratch? They don't have any scratches?" "Impossible," the Rain Shinobi shouted with large drops of sweat. He made a hand signal to send more needles towards the redhead, but some sand moved in front of him and protected him from the needles. "Rain of needles, huh? Then I will make a rain of blood," he said simply. Everyone saw this with wide eyes and the Rain Shinobi said in terror, "A wall of sand?" "Yes, a sand base. Total defense. The sand stored in that chakra gourd protects his body. It is a jutsu only available to Gaara. Also, if Gaara can't, for some reasons it's automatically set. Basically, against Gaara, all attacks are useless," Kankuro explained calmly. That's not possible. These needles have the power to pierce 5 millimeters of metal. Damn it, the Rain Shinobi shouted furiously. Kankuro smiled maliciously and said, "You can't defeat Gaara." The Rain Shinobi gritted his teeth and charged at them while shouting, "Be quiet." But the redhead made a sign with his hands and Kankuro thought calmly, "He is dead." Sabakaku Desert Sarcophagus, Gaara shouted, extending his hand towards the Rain Shinobi. Instantly, a large amount of sand began to cover the shinobi from the rain as if it had a life of its own, and in the end, the poor man was completely covered in sand while saying, "I cannot move." Everyone watched this in panic and Temari calmly said, "The sand in the air and on the ground can be controlled by Gaara." "This is," said the poor Rain Shinobi as he felt the sand crushing him. "Shut up. I can cover your mouth and kill you, but that would be pathetic," Gaara said as he grabbed one of the straw umbrellas and reached out towards the sand dome. The dome that kept the man imprinted rose into the air before everyone's terrified gaze, and when it was at a good height, Gaara closed his hand emotionlessly as he said, "Sabaka's so funeral arena." Instantly, the dome slammed shut and a massive amount of blood splattered all over the place before everyone's terrified gaze as Gaara calmly said, "Without suffering, because I killed him so quickly that he couldn't experience it. The blood is mixing with the sand and it gives more desire to kill." The other two Rain Shinobi looked at him in terror, and one of them put the scroll on the ground while saying, "We will give you the scroll. Please let us go." But Gaara extended his hands towards them and the same sand began to cover them as well as their leader, and Temari told them with a beautiful smile, "Bye-bye." The redhead mercilessly clenched his hands and the ground became more stained with blood before the frightened gaze of Hinata's team. Kankuro took the scroll from the ground and said with a smile, "Lucky us, it's a scroll from heaven. Okay, let's go to the tower." But Gaara looked at him with murderous eyes and said in a dark voice, "Shut up. I haven't had enough." At that moment, Hinata's team felt a huge killing intent directed towards them, and Kiba thought in terror, "Shit, they realized?" "For Gaara," Kankuro told his brother calmly. Gaara looked at him coldly and said angrily, "Are you afraid, coward?" Kankuro looked at him seriously and said, "Gaara, you may be right. But this is very dangerous for us. We only need one scroll, yes, Moss." But Gaara just extended his hand towards the location of Hinata's team and said in a murderous voice, "Don't tell me what to do, trash." His brothers looked at him seriously and Kankuro continued telling him furiously, "Give me a break sometimes. Why don't you listen to your older brother, Gaara?" Gaara looked at him neutrally and said with anxiety, "I have never thought that you are my brother. Get in my way, and I will kill you." Kankuro was scared by these words and Temari said with some fear, "Gaara, stop, okay? Don't say anything like that. Please listen to your sister, okay?" The redhead kept his hand extended towards the bushes where Hinata's team was and Temari shouted at him very upset, "Gaara." He just closed his hand to take the stopper of his gourd and said neutrally, "Okay." He put the stopper in his gourd and started walking while his brothers followed with a sigh. Behind the bushes, Hinata's team was gasping at what they had seen and Kiba said in fear, "That boy in the sand. I don't know who's worse. He's very dangerous." In the tower of the Forest of Death, Luffy along with the rest of Team 7 headed towards the tower in the center of the forest in order to move on to the next test. They managed to arrive after a short trip since they had managed to find the tower thanks to Nami's navigation skills, and upon arriving, the Uchiha finally woke up from unconsciousness. "Where am I? How did I become unconscious?" the black-haired man asked himself, looking around. "It's good to see that you've woken up, Sasuke. We have reached the tower, and we already have the scroll we need. We can now move on to the next test," Luffy told him calmly. Sasuke looked at him with hatred and shouted angrily, "I don't take orders from you, Dobe," Sakura said with some fear. "Sasuke-kun, I think we should leave Luffy alone. He managed to help you with your mark, and thanks to him and his nakamas, we were able to get here safely and on time," Sasuke just glared at her for those words and said angrily, I am an Uchiha, the elite, everyone must obey me, they must kiss my feet and beg for my glory. Sakura looked at him with some fear and then, everyone entered a room where they saw a large poster with some words on it. I guess we should open the scrolls if we've reached the tower, Nami said with a smile. And who do you think you are to tell me what to do? Sasuke said furiously. This caused Luffy to become furious, but he was stopped by Zoro, who moved him to stay calm. However, someone was not calmed by those words and gave the Uchiha a powerful blow, sending him into the wall, creating a huge crater with the black-haired man's body. Don't talk to me that way again, you damn idiot! Nami shouted furiously. Sakura was impressed by what the orange-haired girl had done to Sasuke, and Robin put her hand on her friend's shoulder as she said, Calm down, friend. If we make a wrong move, we'll probably be in trouble. We may have Knight-sensei's protection, but we can't be complacent. Nami just stood by his side while maintaining an annoyed look, and the captain sighed as he said, Well, now that the emo has been knocked out again, we must know the purpose of the test to take him with us and rest. Sakura, let's open the scrolls at once. The pink-haired girl nodded and began to open the scrolls with her companion. Then, Luffy saw a strange seal on the scrolls and shouted, Throw them to the ground, Sakura. They both threw them to the ground to activate them. Instantly, smoke rose from the scrolls and Irika appeared before them with a smile. Irika-sensei? Sakura asked, surprised. The instructor just looked at them with a smile and said, Hi guys, it's good to see that you have managed to get here faster than other participants. Faster? Why do you say that? Nami asked, confused. Because they have only arrived on the first day, and they have managed to arrive with plenty of time. They should be proud to be able to arrive in one day. Sakura was happy to be able to arrive in record time, and Luffy asked Irika, Irika-sensei, why did the scroll appear? Irika smiled even more at his favorite team's enthusiasm and said, We Chunin must receive those who passed the second test of the exam. I am here as an emissary of an important communication. Emissary? Jinbei asked without understanding. Irika smiled at them and said happily, Congratulations, they have passed the second test with honors. To celebrate, I invite you to a bowl of beef ramen. At that moment, Luffy threw himself into his arms while shouting joyfully, Live meat ramen. Irika laughed a little seeing that Luffy was still the same and coughed a little to get back to seriousness. Well, it's good to see that you're happy, but I'm not done yet. See the sign on the wall? He said, pointing at the sign. Everyone looked at him and Sakura asked, What does that incomplete sign mean? I don't understand. These are some guidelines that the Hokages left for you in this exam, Irika said with a smile. Any guidelines? Robin asked with interest. That's it is a metaphor. Heaven refers to the mind, while the earth represents the body. If you lack heaven, acquire the knowledge for opportunity. For example, people like Luffy, their weak point would be knowledge. You must always learn new things and prepare to fulfill your duty when your turn comes, Irika explained, looking at Luffy with a smile. Well, I can say that I have overcome that with some help, Luffy said, looking at his nakamas with a smile. Then Usopp asked with interest, And what does the earth part mean? Irika smiled at that question and said, Good question, boy. If you lack the earth, find the strength to break the fields. The weak point of people like Sakura-san is the lack of physical strength. It means that they must strive and not stop training even for a single day. Sakura felt depressed at Irika's comment, and he smiled proudly as he continued. As soon as they have managed to dominate heaven and earth, they will be able to carry out any mission, no matter how dangerous it may be. And most importantly, they will be able to completely achieve their dreams. They will know the best way to fulfill their duty as ninjas. Luffy looked at him with serious eyes as he understood what he meant and what it meant for his goal. Then Nami asked Irika, But what about the word that is missing in the text? Irika smiled at him and continued with the explanation. This is the word that contains the essence of a Chunin. Nothing more and nothing less than human being, as it was written in the scrolls. The survival test of these 5 days had no other objective than to test their basic skills as Chunin, and they have passed it brilliantly. The Chunin who holds the rank of captain is qualified to lead a group. On a mission, you must never forget the importance of knowledge, strength, or the human heart. I want you to continue on your way keeping these 3 points in mind. That's it, this is the message I had to communicate to you. The third and final test awaits you. Be very careful. With those words, Sakura and the rest understood the objective of the test, and Iruka asked with concern. Hey, where's Sasuke-san? He's supposed to be with you. Luffy pointed at the wall, and looking, Iruka could see how the Uchiha was in a crater in the wall, completely unconscious. But what happened to him? He asked, checking to see if he was okay. Well, I insulted Nami and she hit him for her stupidity, Luffy said seriously. Iruka opened his eyes at these words, and Luffy took Sasuke's body from him while saying, Let's go to a room to rest and leave the emo in a bed. I have no doubt that when he wakes up, he will want to take revenge against us, and it would be best if he doesn't see us until the third test. You're right, Luffy. Let's go to the room and rest a little, Nami said, stroking her hair. With that, everyone entered the tower and went into a room to rest for the remaining days of the second test. Luffy left Sasuke on a bed and said to the others, It would be best to rest so that I would be in good condition for the next test. I suspect that if this test was difficult, the next one will be similar. Everyone and thus agreed went to rest for the next test. Days after, the last teams managed to reach the tower in time for the last test, Kabuto's team and the Sound team. With them, there were now 7 teams and a number of 30 participants for the final test. Kabuto moved through the hallways until he ran into a person who was waiting for him, smiling. I see that you have been very patient. Well, maybe this will help you, said the gray-haired man, handing him a card. The man took the card and inspected it with a smile. On that card is the information for the second test. I'm sure it will be very useful to you, Orochimaru-sama, said Kabuto with a bow. Before him, Orochimaru smiled maliciously and said, Well done, Kabuto-kun. Now we just have to keep an eye on our targets and prepare everything for the fall of this village. As you command, Orochimaru-sama, Kabuto said before retreating. Orochimaru just looked at the card with sharp eyes and said, Kakuku, it's interesting what you've shown me, Luffy-kun. I'm more and more interested in seeing what will happen next. I've never had such a great interest in anything as in seeing all your steps. Keep going like this and show me what the future holds for you, Luffy-kun. Chapter 26. The preliminaries begin. On the 5th day of the second test, all the teams that managed to pass the second test were already in the combat arena to carry out the third test, and before them were the Sandaime with the jounin of each team plus the instructors of each test. I'm starving, Choji thought in agony. There are still quite a few of us left, what a problem, Shikamaru thought lazily. Luffy-kun, they did it, Ino thought, looking at the captain with a smile. Guy looked at Luffy's team and said to Kakashi and Knight with a radiant smile, Your boys are not doing bad at all. Luck must have smiled on them. But as long as mine remain, they will have nothing to do. Your own strength will determine the outcome of the next test. That's youth, Kakashi, Knight. Sometimes sweet like honey and sometimes raw, very raw. But they both just looked at him lazily and said at the same time, Sorry, did you say something? Guy clenched his fist in fury and said with anger in his mind, You can tell they are my rivals. That twisted point of your drives me crazy. Meanwhile, Guy's team was watching Luffy's team and Ten thought, Is that Luffy-kun? Well, he is very handsome. You can see that they are very youthful, but I will not be less than them if Luffy-kun has shown his flames of youth. I will shine even brighter as Guy-sensei's pupil. I just made a decision. Look at me, sensei. I will shine too, thought Lee with fire in his eyes. As I imagined, only the strongest were left. There's Sasuke and also Monkey D. Luffy Uzumaki. Those two are my goals in this test, Niji thought, looking at the Uchiha and the captain. Meanwhile, the Sound crew was looking at Luffy's crew with cold eyes while the bandaged one was thinking, This time we will take revenge against you. Orochimaru, who was disguised as a Jounin instructor, looked at Luffy's team with a smile and watched the captain with interest. Among the teams, the Suna team was calm while Temari thought. There are 7 teams left out of the 30 that entered. On the other hand, Kurenai looked at Kiba with a frown and thought. Something is wrong with Akamaru. He is shaking and looks at Luffy-san with some nerves. On Kurenai's team, Kiba looked at Luffy with interest and thought. What happened to the dobe? He looks very different from before and seems a bit stronger. Hinata looked at Luffy with a big blush and thought with a lot of nerves. Luffy-kun looks amazing. He exudes a confidence and self-assurance that is contagious. He fills me with so much strength. Shino just watched Luffy and his nakamas with interest since his insects were telling him that the black-haired boy's power had grown enormously, and he knew that he now had to be careful with him. On the other hand, Sakura was looking at everyone present nervously and thought, wow, we're all the newbies in the village. Sasuke just looked at Luffy with cold eyes and said, in this test I will show you that you are not above me, Dobe. First of all, I must congratulate you. Congratulations, they have passed the second test, Anko shouted with a smile. The teams that had managed to arrive looked at her with a frown and the purple-haired girl continued. Hokage-sama will explain to you what the third test consists of. Pay close attention to what I tell you, Anko said seriously. The Sandaime stood in front of all the participants and began to say, before explaining the rules of the third test, I want to make one thing clear about the true objective of this exam. The real goal? A few thought. Do you know why ninjas from different countries are being tested at the same time? It is said that it is to foster friendly relations between nations and to increase the level of ninjas. But you must not miss its true meaning, the reason for this exam. Hiruzen said seriously. I can imagine what the real reason is, Nami thought when she heard her words from her. Everyone looked at him carefully and he continued with his patented shinobi look. The reason is to act as a simulation for a possible war. This exam will help them foster a relationship with their peers from other villages so that in a future war they can fight in collaboration and friendship. After all, in previous wars there has been cooperation between villages for the same purpose, and that is what must be strengthened among us, the union of our strength and power to protect what we value most. That is why you will strengthen your ties with a fight between yourselves. And can we really do it with this exam? Sakura asked with doubts. The Sandaime smiled at Sakura's question and continued his explanation of her. That's right. But still, you must keep in mind that you are responsible for the prestige of your country. You must fight to the death for your village. Prestige? Sakura asked again, even more confused. Please note that you will be watched at all times. Important personalities have been invited to attend this exam. Among them are the feudal lords who entrust you with the missions, and even more importantly, the kages and feudal lords of other countries. Even though we are in an alliance, the differences in power between us determine the course of our history. The strongest countries will be the ones that receive the greatest number of missions. On the contrary, the weaker countries will see how the requests decrease. Hiruzen explained seriously. Most understood this concept, and the Hokage decided to move on to the explanation at once. However, a certain person appeared before him with a bow and said while coughing, I apologize, Hokage-sama. Gecko Hate introduces himself to you. Allow me to be the referee of this test. The Sandaime smiled and said, Forward. Hate looked at the participants and said, I'm Hate, nice to meet you. Before I explain the third test, I need you to do something. To start the pre-selection we must do something first. Pre-selection? What is this guy saying with a look like he's going to die soon? Haven't we already passed the second test? Kiba shouted without understanding. Normally yes, but since there are too many of them, there will be a pre-selection to reduce the number of participants. After all, there will be many special guests in the final test, and we can't let them watch useless fights. With that said, we will begin the pre-selection, and to start, I must ask those who do not want to take the test to leave immediately. Hate said with a very cold look. A certain person in the arena just smiled and raised his hand as he said, I'm leaving. Everyone looked at the person with serious eyes and Hate looked at his list as he said, Well, Kabuto Yakushi from the Leaf Village. You can leave. Kabuto smiled amiably at his words and walked out of the arena while being watched by practically everyone in the room. Orochimaru looked at him with a sinister smile, and Kabuto just gave him one in pure amusement. Fufufu, have fun with this, Orochimaru-sama. Kabuto thought evilly. He then looked at Sasuke and Luffy as he left, and thought with amusement. We'll meet again. I'll be waiting impatiently for you, Sasuke-kun, and for you too, Luffy-kun. Sasuke felt great pain in his neck from the mark and thought with frustration. Another wave of pain, they are becoming more frequent, shit. Sakura looked at him with concern and thought. What happens? Luffy and his nakamas observed the Uchiha's behavior, and Luffy said. I can feel an evil aura from Sasuke, but it's not his. It seems like someone evil is trying to invade his body. Then we'll have to be careful with whoever's trying, Nami said seriously. Hate looked at those present and said. Well, it seems there are no more deserters. But Sakura looked at Sasuke with pure concern and shouted seriously. Sasuke, you can't move on like this. Sasuke looked at her with eyes full of fury and asked coldly. Kay? You are very strange since Orochimaru attacked you. That signal still hurts, right? If you continue like this, Sakura shouted seriously. Luffy looked at this seriously and paid attention to the progress of the conversation to know how to act in the future. Sakura said to Sasuke with unusual seriousness. Listen, right now I don't feel the same as I did about you, but you're still my teammate. I asked you to abandon this test and go to Night Sensei to see that mark for your own good. Sakura, Luffy thought, watching this with his eyes open. Nami watched this carefully, waiting for what the Uchiha would do, and watched as the pink-haired woman continued shouting more seriously. You are in no condition to continue fighting, Sasuke. Sasuke just looked at her with eyes full of anger and said with hatred. Be quiet. You're not fooling me, you've been holding back the pain the whole time, Sasuke. Sakura continued to scream, now looking at him angrily. Shut up, Sasuke said again with a look of fury towards the pink-haired girl. I don't care what you tell me, I'm going to tell Night Sensei about the signal and then. Sakura shouted with determination in her eyes. Sasuke gritted his teeth at her words and moved his hand towards the pink-haired girl with clear intentions, but it was stopped by the captain's hand just before he reached Sakura's neck. Sasuke-kun? Luffy? Said the girl, watching with incredulous eyes. Luffy just looked at the black-haired man with dangerous eyes and said in a threatening voice. Are you trying to attack our Nakama team? I never thought you would go so far just because of your path of revenge. Now I see that you are willing to do anything to achieve your goal and that you do not mind hurting your partner, who cares with all her heart for you, if she becomes a threat in your path. If you wish, you can continue in the tournament, but keep your vengeful path away from our Nakama's damn team. Sasuke just gritted his teeth and broke free from the captain's grip angrily as he said. Then keep that useless girl out of my way or I'll let her know her place. Else she has nothing to do with my life and else she never will. Then he looked at him with a manic smile and said arrogantly. Luffy, you are the one I want to fight the most. Make sure you don't lose to anyone and come to me so I can show you that you are not on top of an Uchiha. Luffy only remained calm at his words and looked at Sakura, who was shaking with anger at the black-haired man's words. As you wish, Sasuke, was the only thing the captain said as he looked at the instructor. Nearby, Nami saw this with a smile and said, Well done, Luffy. Hate looked at the participants and continued with his explanation. Well, to continue, the pre-selection will consist of one-on-one combats. They will face each other under the same conditions as a normal battle. As there are 15 battles will be fought and the winners will be able to move on to the third test. The rules are simple. They will fight until one dies, loses consciousness, or surrenders. On the other hand, I can determine if one is not capable of fighting and finishing the fight. Now, look at the screen. Everyone looked at a large screen on the wall and Hate continued. On this screen, the names of those who will fight in each combat will be shown. Now, let's see who will face each other in the first confrontation. The screen was showing several names as if it were a roulette wheel, until it stopped on two names: Sasuke Uchiha vs. Yoroi Akato. I had to be the first, Sasuke thought with a cocky smile. Heh, I'm dying, Yoroi thought maliciously. Why Sasuke? Sakura thought with a sigh. Luffy looked at Sasuke seriously and Hate said, Alright, the two chosen ones, come forward. Sasuke and Yoroi stood in front of Hate as they stared at each other, and the instructor said, The first match will be between Akato Yoroi and Sasuke Uchiha. Before we start, does anyone have any objections? No, said Yoroi. Everything is fine here, Sasuke said with a smile. Orochimaru looked at Sasuke with a creepy smile and both opponents moved away a little to begin the battle. Meanwhile, the Mugiwaras were in the stands and then saw how the fight began. They saw how Sasuke was shaking from the pain of the mark and Yoroi thought maliciously, Juju, it seems that the cursed seal is making him suffer. Well, from now on the first fight will begin, Hate said seriously. Orochimaru looked at Sasuke with a malicious smile and thought, Hey, Yoroi's abilities are out of the ordinary. I suspect this is going to be hell for you, Sasuke-kun. Everyone was watching the fight with excitement, while Sasuke watched Yoroi with cold eyes. Well, you can start, Hate said before disappearing into Shansen. Yoroi made a hand seal and said, Let's go there. Yoroi threw some shurikens towards Sasuke, which he only blocked easily with his kunai, and then he also threw some shurikens that Yoroi blocked with his kunai. Then, Yoroi lunged at Sasuke and grabbed his head to start sucking his chakra. So that's it, Sasuke said, looking at Yoroi with a frown. Jujuju, I see you noticed, Yoroi said maliciously. Orochimaru saw this with an evil smile and thought, Exactly, Yoroi's special ability is to absorb the opponent's chakra. This incredible absorption technique allows him to suck out the opponent's physical and mental strength with the palm of his hand. And when he has sucked all of your chakra out, Sasuke, you will have no choice but to use the power of my seal. Go ahead and unleash that power, that wonderful strength. Sasuke looked at Yoroi with cold eyes as he continued to suck his chakra, while Yoroi looked at him superiorly. Sasuke pushed him away from him, but Yoroi lunged at him again to continue sucking his chakra while he screamed, Suck every last drop of your chakra, let's finish this. Everyone looked at this anxiously and Zoro said, It's the end. The emo will lose unless he comes up with something against his opponent's skill. But at that moment, everyone watched as Sasuke gave Yoroi a huge kick to the chin to throw him into the air, and Lee watched this with wide eyes. That's my technique, he said without being able to believe it. Yoroi flew through the air and felt Sasuke appear behind him as he said, Now I will use my own techniques. Yoroi looked at him with sweat and said, It's the shadow dance technique. Sasuke smiled evilly and said, Fit this. However, his mark began to spread across his body and black flames began to be seen on him. Everyone, especially Orochimaru, saw this and Sasuke just smiled evilly as he began to move quickly through the air to execute the technique he had stolen from Lee. He kicked Yoroi in the abdomen, then hit him with his fist towards the ground, and when they were about to fall, Sasuke gave him a powerful kick while he shouted, Lion Strike. They both fell to the ground and Hate checked Yoroi's condition to say, This match ends here. Which means, the winner of the first match is Sasuke Uchiha, and he moves on to the next test. Applause could be heard in the arena and Sasuke started to go to the stands while holding his body from the pain he experienced. Meanwhile, Lee said with eyes full of fury, He stole my technique. This caught the attention of everyone around him, and the dark-eyed man continued saying, When we fought that time, he had to copy it with his Sharingan. I feel so bad, it was a technique that I trained with a lot of effort, and I copied it to use it so easily. Everyone looked at him sadly and Sanji said, In that case, the Uchiha's strength is false. Everyone looked at him with curiosity and he continued, If he steals others' techniques, then he uses stolen strength. He is not a true fighter, just a fake one who steals others' strength to fight. And by fighting like that, he is only disrespecting those who use true strength. Everyone looked at him in amazement and Luffy said to Lee, Don't worry. He may have copied your technique, but he does not possess the same strength that you possess. Therefore, his version of him is much weaker than yours. Lee looked at him with wide eyes and then gave him a big, radiant smile as he said, You're right, Luffy-kun, my strength is something he can't copy, and that way I can shine. Guy smiled at Luffy and said with a radiant smile, Thank you, Luffy-kun, you've managed to keep the flames of Lee's youth burning brightly. When Sasuke arrived with the others and congratulated him, Kakashi went towards him to take him somewhere, and the screen began to rotate the names until it stopped on the following combatants. Abumi Zaka vs. Brook. In short, Brook managed to win by having understood Zaka's sound ability, and defeated him with a powerful ice attack. After Brook's victory, the screen shouted the names again until it stopped at the following names. Misumi Tsuga vs. Frankie. The battle was quick as Frankie demonstrated great power with his robotic body, impressing everyone and causing the interest of a certain snake. Then, the screen showed the following names, surprising most. Sakura Haruno vs. Nami. A powerful development is coming for a certain pink-haired woman. Chapter 27, Cherry Blossom vs. Sunflower. Some opened their eyes at the names and Sakura looked at the screen in fear. Why against her? Nami slammed her fist against her hand and said with a big smile. It's time to show off, here we go. Nami, don't go overboard with her. I know how strong you are and she is not at our level, Luffy told him seriously. Nami gave him a cute smile and said, Don't worry, Luffy. I'll just make sure to show her what a truly strong woman she is. That's what worries me, Luffy said with a sigh. The orange-haired girl jumped from the stands towards the battlefield while the pink-haired girl was reluctant to come down. Kakashi-sensei, is it okay if I come down? She asked fearfully. Kakashi looked at her with a frown and said seriously, If you want to advance in your ninja career, it would be best for you to face this battle. However, you have the option to forget the fight if you do not wish to fight. It is your decision. Sakura looked at the battlefield, where Nami was waiting for her with a determined look, and began to go down the stairs slowly while remembering everything she experienced with her team these last few days. Meanwhile, Ino watched her go down with some concern and said to her team, I'm worried about Sakura. I don't doubt that Nami is a strong girl and capable of fighting a ninja, and that's why I'm worried about her. I don't think Sakura will be able to beat her. Her classmates looked at her in amazement, and Shikamura said, Well, she has the option to give up on this battle from the start and avoid danger. If she knows how strong Nami is, I guess that's what she'll do. Already in the combat arena, both girls were before Hate, who observed them carefully to see if they were ready for combat, and asked, Are you ready to fight? Nami nodded and Sakura hesitated a little until she said nervously, I think so. Hate nodded and then shouted loudly, In that case, begin. With that, she disappeared to allow the fight to begin. When they were alone, Nami said to Sakura, I'll tell you one thing, Sakura. I'm going to use what Robin taught me about flowers to express how we really are. Sakura looked at her with wide eyes, as did Ino, since the theme of flowers was something special to both of them. If you asked me what type of flower I am, I would say the sunflower. Do you know why? Nami said, looking at Sakura with pure seriousness. I really can't understand it, because you would be any flower that reflects beauty and the sunflower doesn't reflect much. Why would you be the sunflower? Sakura asked, interested. Nami directed her gaze to the stands, more specifically to a certain captain with a bright smile who looked at her with warm eyes and said with a comforting smile, Because the sunflower always looks towards the sun. It is a flower that depends a lot on the nutrients of the sun, and for that reason it has the ability to move, to always be in its presence. I am like the sunflower because I will always rely on the sun of my life, the one that gives me the strength to move forward. Like the sunflower, I will always be standing as long as my sun shines on me. This impressed Sakura, who looked at Luffy in amazement, and Ino, who was amazed at such a rendition of such a flower, and couldn't help but agree with her that it clearly fits that type of flower. Then Nami looked at Sakura with furious eyes and said, You, on the other hand, are just as your name says, a cherry blossom. However, unlike me, You are a cherry blossom whose petals fall withered to the ground. Do you want to know why? Hearing this, Ino opened her eyes and said with a deep tremble, She's being very cruel to her. Do you know what he's talking about, Ino? Shikamaru asked curiously. Yes, and it's a very cruel truth, Ino responded, squeezing the railing. Sakura looked at Nami tremblingly and asked, Why do you say that I am a cherry blossom whose petals fall to the ground? What are you trying to tell me? Nami just looked at her with cold eyes and said, Because unlike me, you withered by following the darkness. By following that stupid emo, you never got the strength or the light to be a beautiful cherry blossom whose petals fall beautifully. You followed the darkness, and that's why you fell with black petals because of how weak and pathetic you became. That's the difference between you and me, just like the difference between that damn emo and Luffy. Luffy is the sun that gives strength, while that emo is the darkness that takes it away, and because of that, you have come to this trial to fall like a withered flower. Sakura looked at her with tears and began to raise her hand while saying in pain, Referee. Don't you dare quit, Nami shouted angrily. Everyone looked at her with wide eyes and Sakura looked at her in disbelief. Nami pointed an angry finger at her and shouted furiously, If there is something I hate more than perverts and disgusting pirates who don't follow the adventure, it's people who give up. That's something I acquired from being with Luffy. I hate people who give up in a fight, and even more hate women who don't fight with all their power. Don't you dare retreat, because if you do, I swear I'll kill you. Sakura looked at her with more fear and looked around to know what to do, when she stopped her gaze on Luffy, who looked at her calmly, but when she looked at him, he gave her a comforting smile that surprised her. She smiled sarcastically and said with a new strength, How ironic. Now I understand why he is the sun that gives you strength. His smile alone is enough to strengthen anyone. I guess I can be a special cherry blossom that blooms with the sun that strengthens the sunflower. He lowered his hand and put the ninja band on his forehead with new eyes that showed only pure determination as he said, I hope you're ready, sunflower. This cherry blossom will show you that it will release some really beautiful petals thanks to the strength it has obtained from the sun. Sakura, Ino said, looking at her with wide eyes. Nami looked at her neutrally for a few moments, and then smiled with amusement as she said, That's how you say it. You've already taken the first step towards becoming a strong woman. Then, both looked at each other with the same determined look, and after a few seconds, the first to move was Sakura by throwing several shurikens towards the orange-haired girl. Nami only took out her staff and blocked them all with speed to launch herself at her at high speed. Sakura only made several hand seals, and when the orange-haired girl landed to blow on her, everyone was surprised to see that she had pierced her. Did I cross it? Usopp asked when he saw this. Genjutsu, Knight said with a smile. Are you talking about the art of illusions? Sanji asked in surprise. That's right. Believe it or not, Sakura is a scholar in Genjutsu, even more than Sasuke, and maybe she can have a chance against Nami with that, Kakashi explained seriously. Nami looked around seriously, trying to locate Sakura, and closed her eyes before everyone's stunned gaze. Why are you closing your eyes? In front of a genjutsu, that's crazy, Kurenai said with a frown. Everyone watched as the orange-haired girl remained like that for a long time, until she extended her hand to stop a blow that was aimed at her face by a Sakura stunned by what had just happened. How is it possible? She shouted without being able to believe it. Did you see through the genjutsu? But he didn't do anything to dispel it, Kurenai shouted in astonishment. Nami just smiled like a kitten and said, I found you. And with that, he threw a powerful punch at the pink-haired girl's face, sending her flying against the wall like a bullet. That must hurt, Kiba said in terror. What strength? Tenten shouted in surprise. It looks a bit like Tsunade-sama's strength, Kakashi said with a drop of sweat. Sakura, Ino shouted worriedly. If she survives that blow, then there will be no doubt that she is a strong woman. Only a really strong person can survive a blow from Nami, said Luffy with a drop of sweat. His male nakama agreed to his words and continued to watch the combat with interest. Hate watched the wall carefully to see if she should declare Nami the winner and watched as the pink-haired girl struggled to get up from the ground while he looked at Nami with more determination and shouted, "I'm not finished yet, Nami." Nami smiled upon hearing these words, and so, both of them launched themselves against each other to begin a fierce battle of blows that impressed everyone present. "What a battle!" Kiba shouted excitedly. "Come on, Sakura-chan!" Lee shouted happily. "You can do it," Sakura Ino shouted with a smile. "Come on, Nami," her nakamas shouted. Luffy watched the battle intently, waiting for the outcome while inwardly rooting for the two girls. After a fierce battle of blows, the two separated and Sakura threw several kunai and shurikens while shouting, "Shuriken Kage Bunshin." The kunai and shuriken multiply on their way towards the orange-haired woman, and she only performed several hand signals while shouting, "Futon Nu." A large amount of wind blew, forming a 360-degree wave that protected her from the kunai and shurikens, sending them flying away. Some looked at this in amazement, and Temari said, She's a great futon user. It'll be interesting to face her." Sakura looked at her with wide eyes, and Nami just started twirling her staff while saying, "I'm proud of you, Sakura. You've proven that you can become a strong woman. I'm very happy for you. But this battle is already over." Then, everyone watched as Nami made a very familiar seal with her hands while her staff gave off a kind of mist everywhere. The judgment of the Kage Bunshin. Instantly, two clones of Nami appeared on either side of him, and Kakashi said, "When did you learn Kage Bunshin?" Knight smiled at her words and only said, "Well, she learned it with Luffy, and if you're wondering how she can use it without the risk, she has increased her chakra reserve thanks to training very hard to get to where she is." Sakura looked at the three Nami seriously and asked, "Are you going to beat me with Luffy's jutsu?" Nami smiled like a cat, and while the steam covered her and the clones, she said, "With that and with my own power." Instantly, the three Namis were replaced by 15 strange-looking Namis. Everyone saw this with wide eyes, and the 5 Namis shouted, "Mirage time, Fata Morgana." "What is that? Genjutsu?" Kurenai screamed in disbelief. "It seems like a genjutsu, but he must have applied it to all of us because we also see it," Shino said calmly. "It doesn't look like genjutsu. My Byakugan doesn't notice chakra in those images, and I can only see something that looks like water and air," said Hinata with the Byakugan activated. "Atmospheric illusion," Knight said with a smile. Everyone looked at him in amazement, and Kurenai asked, "What are you talking about, Knight?" "That's an illusion created from the power of the weather. Take the mirage of heat or fog as an example. Nami is a master of the power of the weather, and she has been able to create wonderful techniques based on the power of the atmosphere. That's just a small sample of the power of the future Pirate Queen," he explained with a smile. Everyone was amazed at such information and looked at the battlefield to see how this would continue. Sakura looked at the 15 Namis seriously and shouted, "And how do you plan to defeat me with illusions?" The 15 Namis smiled even more, and instantly, they separated into 3 groups of 5 in a triangle formation around the pink-haired girl. Then, the 15 Namis began to perform different hand signals that left everyone speechless. "Futon, Tornado Strike," shouted to a group. "Raiton, Raikyu Lightning Release, Lightning Sphere," another group shouted. "Suiton, Taihoden Water Release, Water Cannon," the third group shouted. Several tornadoes of wind emerged from the first group, the second released spheres of lightning, and the third group released powerful jets of water from their mouths. The 3 sets of attacks were directed towards the Pinkette, who only glared at the attacks as she shouted, "They don't scare me. I'll just have to dodge them all, and I'll be able to attack you in the end." But Nami's voice could be heard as she said with amusement, "But will you be able to find my true self among the clones and illusions at the same time that you will be able to distinguish which attack is the real one from the illusion?" Hearing this, Sakura's eyes widened as she realized that she had definitely lost. All 3 sets of attacks managed to hit the poor girl and caused a huge black cloud to explode with the sound of thunder and lightning, causing everyone to grab onto the tubes from the powerful wind that shook them. "This is," Knight said, realizing what he was seeing. Incredible, Luffy shouted as he looked at the explosion with shiny eyes. After a good while of feeling the power of the weather, everything finally calmed down, and upon seeing the fight, everyone could see how the pink-haired girl was in Nami's arms, who held her with a smile, while the girl was unconscious of her defeat of her. The winner is Nami from the Leaf Village, Hate shouted, still shocked. Everyone was speechless at what they had seen, and Nami only went towards the medical ninjas who had appeared to hand Sakura to them while saying, "You fought very well, friend, you have fallen like a beautiful cherry petal that had a beautiful life." At this scene, everyone applauded for the wonderful battle they had witnessed, and Kurenai said, "It was a wonderful battle. That girl is a great kunoichi. I want to make her my pupil of her." "No way, she will be my pupil and I will make her a great student," Anko said with emotion. "Wonderful, Sakura-chan, Nami-chan, they have shown their flames of youth," Lee shouted with emotion. "Humph, even so he will not escape his fate from him," Niji said neutrally. "That was wonderful, Nami-san," Hinata said with admiration. "What kind of kunoichi is she?" Temari wondered as she watched the battle. "That was wonderful, it reminds me of Tsunade-sama's great deeds," Tenten said excitedly. "How is Sakura doing?" Ino asked herself worriedly. "That girl, it was just for an instant, but I could see that she used the rant and storm element. To think that I would find a user of that element here. Kukuku, how exciting," thought Orochimaru hidden in his disguise from him. Nami went up the stairs until she arrived with her team and was instantly hugged by Luffy, who said with joy, "You did wonderfully, Nami, as always, you are the best." Nami blushed at her captain's praise of her, and only said, "Oh, Luffy, you embarrass me." Knight looked at her carefully and thought, "Having such an item, it seems that by bringing them, some things happen that I didn't notice. Well, even a god like me can't prevent such things. Now let's see how this continues." Chapter 28, Monkey vs. Dog. After that impressive fight, the screen showed the following names. Sabaka no Temari vs. Usopp. The battle was really fast as poor Usopp surrendered in an instant, and the victory went to the blonde, who was very angry at the big nose's cowardice. After that, the screen showed the following names. Tenten vs. Sanji. The battle was the same as the previous one. Sanji immediately retreated, saying that he would never fight a lady despite Tenten's protests that he had no compassion for being a girl, but the blonde made it clear that he was a gentleman, and that his rule was that he would never lay a hand on a woman no matter what. After that, the screen showed the following names. Tsuchikin vs. Zoro. The victory was Zoro's, since unlike Sanji, he attacked the kunoichi sound without hesitation, and the poor girl ended up defeated with a cut on her stomach. After that victory for the green-haired boy, the screen showed the following fight. Shikamaru Nara vs. Yasu. The victory went to Shikamaru, thanks to the enormous mind of the Nara, who managed to find a way to deal with the shinobi's sound ability. After that fight, the screen showed two names that caused an impact throughout the arena. Inuzuka Kiba vs. Monkey D. Luffy Uzumaki. Luffy just looked at his nakamas with a smile, and they gave him a supportive smile, while saying, "Go and kick ass, Captain." Luffy gave them a sly smile and said, "Of course." Everyone looked at the screen in surprise. "Ace? Monkey? Have you ever heard a last name like that? Could it be a new clan in the village? And what is the D in your name? I had never heard of a letter in a name." Those were the thoughts of everyone in the room as they saw Luffy's name on the screen. Kiba just smiled arrogantly and said, "Well, looks like we got Luffy. Akamaru, who cares what his last name is? He's still the same old loser dog, we're going to beat him to a pulp." However, Akamaru just shivered in his coat and remained hidden from the black-haired man. Luffy just looked at his sensei Knight and said, "Here I eat, sensei." Knight smiled at him and said, "Go, Luffy. But remember to fight while watching your opponent. In fighting you can learn many things and become stronger." Luffy nodded, and with that, he jumped over the steps to land in the arena. Kakashi looked at Knight with interest and said, "That's a good lesson. How much have you taught our student?" Knight just smiled at him like he always does and said, "Enough so that I can kick the ass of all these kids here together, and come out without a scratch. Kakashi opened his eyes at these words and turned his gaze to his genin's battle. In the arena, Kiba and Luffy were looking at each other while Hate said, "Ninth combat, Monkey D. Luffy Uzumaki against Inuzuka Kiba. This is already one, how lucky we are," Kiba shouted excitedly. But Luffy just looked at poor Akamaru, who was trembling, not out of fear, but out of respect, and said in a serious tone, "Kiba, I advise you to tell Akamaru to go to the stands. It is not a good idea for him to be in this fight, or he will get very hurt." Kiba looked at him with angry eyes, and putting Akamaru on the ground, he shouted, "Fool, Akamaru fights at my side, besides, you won't have a chance against us." But Luffy looked at Akamaru with powerful eyes, and releasing a little of his conqueror's haki, he said in a cold voice, "Get lost." Akamaru could only howl like a scolded puppy and ran towards the stands to hide in the Hyuga's legs, who took him affectionately and looked at Luffy with admiration. "Akamaru, come back here and fight," Kiba shouted angrily. "It's useless, Kiba. I've ordered him to return with my will, and now he won't come down from there while I'm here. Believe me, I'm doing it for his own good so that the poor little dog doesn't suffer because of this battle," Luffy told him with powerful eyes. Kiba gritted his teeth at these words and shouted at Akamaru in fury, "Akamaru, eat here now, I am your master." But the little dog remained with Hinata, and Luffy only said with annoyance, "I told you it's useless. By using my will, Akamaru has learned that the Alpha is me and how good a dog he is. He won't listen to anyone but the Alpha in this situation. But from what I see, it seems that you need your partner to confront me. If you are not capable of fighting on your own, then I have no doubt that you do not have what it takes to be a true ninja." Kiba gritted his teeth at Luffy's words and began to tremble with rage as he said, "Look at you, what a lot of talk. If you're going to get like this, then I'll fight just to crush you." In the stands, Kakashi watched this in amazement and looked at Knight to ask, "Were you the one who taught him to act that way?" Knight smiled at the question and said, "Something like that. I'm an expert in calmer, more psychological combat. I taught Luffy about the different methods of staying calm in a fight, and how to observe everything in a fight to learn from it." Kakashi looked at Knight with his eye open and thought, "The ability to teach in subjects that complement the other. There is no doubt that Knight is a shinobi that transcends those that have been known." Sakura, who had returned after healing, looked at Luffy with an excited face and shouted happily, "Luffy, kick that dog's ass and let's go eat a nice bowl of beef ramen." The black-haired man looked at her with a smile, and Nami looked at her with a smile while thinking, "It seems like he has fully opened his eyes and realized that the sun is what can give him the strength he needs. That is good." Kurenai watched the dark-haired man with interest and could hear Knight and Kakashi's conversation about the blonde's teaching method, and upon learning that the dark shinobi had taught him to remain calm in a battle, she watched the dark-haired man with more interest as she thought, "If Luffy-san was trained by the two of them, then Kiba may not stand a chance if he was trained by two people who display so much power." Meanwhile, Kiba was looking at Luffy with an arrogant smile as he thought, "Whoa, I have no idea if he has gotten stronger since he became a ninja, but..." He remembered how Luffy was not able to create a proper transformation in 3rd grade, and how he was a simple weakling who was just a class clown, as he looked at him arrogantly and said, "I'll spare you the ridicule, Luffy. I will finish you with a single blow." The black-haired man just looked at him calmly and said in a powerful tone, "Those are very big words for someone who has barely lived a lifetime as a ninja. You need at least 4 more lives to be able to say those kinds of words. But don't worry, Kiba. I'll finish this without even touching you." Kiba gritted his teeth at her response and shouted, "Stop being arrogant with me, I'm getting fed up with your attitude, act like the stupid person you always were, and the stupid person you always will be." Luffy just looked down and Hate said with a smile, "Okay. Get started." The moment he said that, Kiba crouched down while making a hand signal and shouted, "Animal technique, 4 claws." Instantly, his nails sharpened like claws and his hands were covered in chakra. Kiba got on all fours and said with an arrogant smile, "Let's go there." He launched himself at high speed towards the black-haired man to hit him and end this. while the others watched the battle with great interest and saw how the captain remained in his place without moving. "What is Luffy doing? Why isn't he moving?" Sakura asked without understanding. Kakashi also saw this with concern, but Knight and the Mugiwaras knew what was happening. Then, when Kiba arrived where the black-haired man was, everyone saw with wide eyes how Luffy had moved at a speed much faster than the Inuzuka and hit his opponent with his fist covered in black matter and a golden aura that stood in the way. Between his fist and Kiba. "He's not touching him!" Everyone shouted when they saw this. Everyone watched as Luffy continued to connect with his punch to the Inuzuka's stomach, until he sent him flying towards the wall with so much power that when he crashed into it, he created several craters until Kiba's body flew out of the tower. When the impressive blow ended, everyone was with their mouths open as they looked at the black-haired man, who only looked at the huge hole in the wall and said to the instructor, "I think he won't be able to get up for a while. I suggest that you finish this fight and move on to the next." Hade could only nod and announced, still in shock, "The winner is Monkey D. Luffy Uzumaki." Everyone watched as the black-haired boy walked up the stairs with a smile towards his nakamas, and Knight said to him proudly, "Well done, Luffy." Luffy looked at him with a big smile and said, "Thank you, Sensei." Then Nami threw herself on top of him and hugged him tightly, putting her head on his breasts, and said happily, "You did it, Luffy, I knew you would make it." Luffy smiled at the orange-haired girl's display of affection, and then, when Luffy finally separated from Nami, a certain Hyuga approached him and said bravely after seeing the scene, "Luffy-kun, congratulations on winning. I knew you would pass the test." Luffy looked at her with a smile and said kindly, "Thank you very much, Hinata-chan. Your support is very important to me, and I would like us to go somewhere to eat after the test if you wish." Hinata looked at him with her face redder than a tomato and asked, very embarrassed, "Are you three inviting you a CI date?" Luffy looked at her with that smile that made her fall in love and said, "If you want it to be that way, then so be it. I'll look for you after this test, and we'll go to Ichiraku Ramen to eat together." Hinata had a seizure and almost fainted with steam coming out of her head, but she was able to stay upright while repeating in her mind, "Stay on your feet, Hinata. If Luffy-kun has gotten stronger, so must you." So after Luffy left with his crew, she was stopped by Nami, who said to her, "I see you like Luffy, Hinata-chan." Hinata looked at her with narrowed eyes and said, "And I see that you too. Are you planning to take it off?" Nami could only laugh at those words and said with amusement, "Of course not. It is not necessary for one of us to take it from the other, and for us to be left without it. I have the solution so that we can all be happy." Hinata looked at her doubtfully and asked, "How would that be possible?" Nami gave him a big smile, and as she walked over to her team, she happily said, "I'll tell you after this test." Hinata watched her go with wide eyes, while Kurenai watched the girl who had spoken to her student with wide eyes as she wondered what kind of girl she was. Meanwhile, everyone looked at Luffy with his crew without abandoning their amazement, and the Hokage thought with a smile, "I'm happy for you, Luffy-kun. You have gotten some good nakamas and teachers in your life." Chapter 29: The Will of a Beautiful Hyuga. After Luffy's battle against Kiba, the following battles were somewhat entertaining. Ino vs. Robin. Robin won elegantly by using one of her clones to trick Ino in her mental jutsu and move on to the final round. Then, the screen showed two names that caused amazement. Neji Hyuga vs. Hinata Hyuga. Everyone looked at the named ones with wide eyes, and Kurenai thought, "Hinata. It promises to be an interesting fight," thought the Hokage. Everyone saw how both Hyugas had gone down the stairs to stand face to face on the battlefield, and then Neji said to Hinata with a tone full of contempt, "I didn't imagine I would have to fight you, Hinata-sama." "Neji ni-san," Hinata said with some pain. "Wait, Hinata and Neji are brothers?" Nami asked, shocked by such information. "They both belong to the most prestigious and ancient clan in Konoha, the Hyuga clan. But they are not brothers," Kakashi explained seriously. "So what are they?" Sakura asked, interested. Within the Hyuga clan, there are members with more prestige than others. The main branch and the secondary branch, Knight answered seriously. Main branch and secondary branch? Sanji asked, looking at Knight suspiciously. But it was Lee who gave the explanation for that fact. Exactly, Hinata belongs to the main branch, the legitimate heirs of the clan, while Niji descends from one of the secondary branches. So it's going to be a battle between relatives? It's not going to be easy for them, Usopp said with some concern. Actually, there's been a lot of tension between the main branch and the branches. They're not exactly getting along right now, Lee said thoughtfully. And why is that happening? They are cousins, almost brothers. There shouldn't be any problem between them, Luffy said seriously. The truth is, I don't know either. But a rumor circulates among the oldest clans. They say that to protect the purity of blood in his clan, the founder of the Hyuga clan establishes a series of internal rules that favor the main branch over the secondary branches. Apparently, the main branch looks down on the secondary branches, Lee explained seriously. At this revelation, everyone's eyes widened and Sakura said ironically, "Then it is a combat with double meaning." At that moment, Hate shouted loudly, "Well, let the fight begin." With that, he retreated from the battlefield to let them fight alone. As he left, Niji looked at his cousin with cold eyes and said, "I'll let you know something before we start, Hinata-sama." Hinata looked at him with some fear of what he would say, and the arrogant Hyuga said with contempt, "You are no good to be a ninja. Give up now." At these words, not only Hinata was shocked, but so was everyone else. "You're too soft. Your conciliatory spirit only brings problems, and you always let yourself be carried away by what others think. You don't trust yourself, you suffer from a tremendous inferiority complex. You should have settled for being an inferior ninja. But of course, the entire team has to participate in the exam. And you were unable to refuse due to Kiba and Shino's insistence. The truth is that you're here by force. Or am I wrong?" Niji continued with contemplation. No, that's not true. I'm trying to change. I want to be different," poor Hinata said shyly. Everyone looked at her with wide eyes at these words, and Kurenai remembered when Hinata's father had talked to her about how his daughter Ella was weaker than her sister Ella and that he was worried about what the Hyuga Council of Elders would do to her. Then Niji told her with pure coldness, "Hinata-sama, you are nothing more than the spoiled child of the clan. People cannot change their destiny. Useless people remain useless. You cannot change your strength or your level." At these words, Luffy and his nakamas looked at Niji with fury, and Hinata looked at him with trembling in her body. Differences are what make change impossible. That is why the words elite and useless exist. We are all judged by what we are. Our face, intelligence, physique, personality. There are things that cannot be changed. That is why there will always be difference and, by extension, discrimination. Like the one we suffer from secondary branches. And as a member of one of them, I know that a member of the main branch cannot stop being one," Niji continued saying with pure contempt. Luffy glared at Niji through gritted teeth as he bent the railing pike from the strength he held it in anger. Nami was also furious and glared at Niji as her aura of anger increased like Luffy's. "I have seen through you with the white eye. I know you just pretend to be strong. Actually, you wish you could run out of here," Niji said to his cousin coldly. "No, it's not true, Hinata shouted with some courage. At this, Usopp asked curiously, "The white eye?" "It's a dijutsu called Byakugan. It's a technique that the Hyuga clan possesses. The Byakugan is a bloodline dijutsu. It's similar to the Uchiha's Sharingan and the Rinnegan, although the Byakugan's perception ability surpasses even those two dijutsus," Knight explained seriously. Niji activated his Byakugan before poor Hinata, who trembled even more before the dijutsu of her clan in her cousin's eyes. "You cannot deceive my eyes. When you felt the pressure of my gaze, you looked away to the left. It means that you remembered an experience from the past, from your sad past. An instant later, you lowered your eyes to the right, It means that you imagine spiritual and physical suffering. You saw yourself in the past. Your experiences allow me to predict the outcome of the fight, and they tell me that I will defeat you. This increased the fury of Luffy and the Mugiwaras, and the stupid Hyuga said with more contempt. Also, that gesture touching your lip also betrays you. You always do it when you get nervous. It is a tic that reveals your restlessness and the attempts you make to calm down and establish a defense mechanism. Which means that deep in your heart you know the truth. You know that you are incapable of changing. Of course he can, you big idiot, was the shout of a certain person that echoed throughout the combat arena. Everyone stared at the cause of the scream with wide eyes, with Hinata looking at him in shock and Neji looking at him in contemplation. Before everyone, an angry Luffy looked at the Hyuga prodigy as he had once seen a certain fisherman when he went to free his navigator from his prison. You don't decide the lives of others. Damn man, everyone has the opportunity to be strong if they have the desire. Hinata, show him how strong you can become. I know you can do it, he shouted with all the strength he had. Luffy is right, you don't decide who can be strong and who can't. If it was as you say, stupid freak, I would have remained a simple weak woman without being able to fight. What do you think, idiot? I have managed to defeat strong enemies alone. When everyone thought me to be the weakest of the group, those who underestimate me believing me to be a weak woman will pay for it. Hinata, show him that you can also become a strong woman. We believe in you, was Nami's shout supporting Luffy. Luffy-kun! Nami-san! Hinata thought, looking at them with wide eyes. He looked down after those words, while Neji just looked at Luffy and his group with contempt and thought, stupid weaklings. But when he looked at his cousin Deella, he opened his eyes when he saw her with a more determined look, and ones that only reflected a will worthy of a princess. Thank you? Was the only thing the beautiful Hyuga thought with a new determination. His gaze on her has changed, Neji thought as he saw her change on her. You're not planning on retiring, are you? I'm not responsible for what happens to you then, he said neutrally. Hinata closed her eyes as she remembered how Luffy stood firm before everyone and never bowed down to anyone in order to follow his dream of her. She opened her eyes with her Dijitsu activated and thought, I won't be weak anymore. I will be like Luffy-kun and Nami-san and find my true strength to achieve my dream, to change the Hyuga clan. Byakugan, she shouted with fire in her eyes. Everyone saw her amazed by her new facet of her, and the beautiful purple-haired princess told her cousin forcefully. It's war, Neji-ni-san. And that? Lee said, looking at what happened with amazement. Neji just took his Hyugan stance and activating his Byakugan said, whatever you want. Lee looked at this seriously and said, it is noticeable that this is the Hyuga combat style. His stance is identical to Neji's. Luffy's group looked at him with interest and Sanji asked, the Hyuga style? It is the most powerful style of techniques in the entire village. Lee responded seriously. What are you talking about? Zoro asked with interest. I told you before. The most powerful genin of all is here on my team. I was referring to Neji Hyuga, Lee told them in frustration. At that moment, both cousins launched themselves against each other in a fierce fight of Hyuga techniques in which Hinata had started with a bit of an advantage by being able to connect several blows with the Hyugan. However, everyone watched with wide eyes as Neji managed to connect several of Hinata's pressure points, and the poor girl began to fall before her cousin's technique. So, while coughing blood on the ground, Hinata began to get up while her cousin said to her with contemplation, retreat, you can't change your destiny. But the pearl-eyed girl just looked at him with eyes full of will and said with pure determination, I'm not going to give up. I won't go back on what I've said because that's my ninja way. Luffy looked at her in surprise at her words and said, Hinata is amazing. She is a very strong girl. He looks a bit like you, Luffy, Nami said with a smile. Now that they mention it, Hinata has always noticed Luffy, Sakura said, looking at the battle seriously. Neji looked at Hinata coldly and said, your ninja path? Don't give me that nonsense. You have absolutely nothing in your destiny to form a ninja path. Neither strength, nor will, much less a dream. Hinata glared at him and screamed at the top of her lungs. You're wrong about that. Yes, I have a dream with which I can be happy. I will change the Hyuga clan and make it a fair and equal clan for both branches. As he shouted that, a large wave of purple will spread throughout the place, causing everyone to freeze as they felt that enormous will on their skin. What was that? The majority thought. Is that what Luffy used in the test? Sakura thought in shock. She owns it. She knew it, thought Luffy with a big smile. Gaara looked at the Hyuga with a look full of blood, and Neji just glared at her as he said, I already told you that you can't change your destiny. It doesn't matter what I felt there. You are useless, and you will always be. Luffy gritted his teeth at her words and shouted loudly, Hinata, give him his deservation. You have already shown your great will, now show your strength. Hinata showed a look full of fury and launched herself at her cousin with a strength and will that no one had ever seen in her. Neji looked at her in surprise and thought, he has regained his courage. Hinata began to throw blows with her Hyuken towards her cousin while thinking proudly, I've always had my eye on you, Luffy-kun. Ever since the moment we met and you saved me, I've been watching you. I don't know why though. I don't know why, but when I look at you, I feel a great sense of courage and will. I thought that if I tried hard I could become like you and have confidence in myself. Knight was watching Hinata's battle with interest and thought, that she possesses the king's haki seems curious to me. How will he have achieved it if it is not common for someone in this world to wake him up? It would be normal for the other two to learn, since even people from any world are capable of learning it with a good teacher. But awakening the king's haki the way she did is almost impossible. Unless, could it have something to do with it? The fact that Hinata has been following Luffy for so many years and is so determined to fulfill her dream? So, Luffy would have been sharing his will to Hinata, and in that way, she managed to awaken the king's haki. It is like the story of the Sage of the Six Paths, in which he was able to share the chakra with the people who followed him. Interesting. The battle between the two cousins continued for a while, until Neji landed several critical blows on her, and Hate began to say seriously, the fight cannot continue. I don't stop it, Hinata shouted, getting up with difficulty. Everyone looked at her in amazement, and Luffy looked at her with a smile, seeing that she would get up no matter what happened. Neji looked at her with contempt and asked, why do you keep getting up? Since you were born, the fate of the Hyuga clan has weighed on your shoulders. For someone so weak, that's a curse. I have already told you that people cannot change their destiny. But Hinata looked at him with eyes full of kindness and said, you are wrong, Neji-ni-san. I've been watching you too, more than even you have been watching me. You suffer in the middle of the labyrinth of intrigues of our family and… At these words, Neji looked at her with an anger beyond imagination and launched himself at her with the clear intention of killing. Seeing this, Hate shouted at Neji, Neji, the fight is over, damn. Instantly, the Hyuga prodigy was held back by someone no one expected. The fight is over, you stupid bastard, I won't let you hurt Hinata, Luffy said with cold eyes. Before several jounin who had come down, there was a Luffy holding Neji with his hand on the Hyuga's neck and pulling him away from Hinata. Thank you, Luffy-san. You have acted on behalf of a fellow shinobi, so your intervention will not be harmful to you, Hate said with a smile. But at that moment, Hinata felt how her organs impacted by Neji's Hyuken were damaged more, and she began to vomit blood until she fell to the ground. Hinata, Luffy shouted, heading towards her. Chopper, check it, Nami shouted scared. Luffy looked at her with concern, while the Hyuga looked at him with a loving smile and closed her eyes with one last thought. Luffy-kun, do you think I will achieve my dream? Do you think I can do it, with a little of your will? Luffy looked at her with a smile as she was carried by the medical team and Chopper to the medical area, when he heard Neji's voice from her saying, I have useless. Luffy looked at him with furious eyes, and the Hyuga said to him with contemplation, this is the second time I've warned you. A self-respecting ninja doesn't encourage strangers, and I'll tell you something else. The weak will always remain weak. They will never change. Luffy just stood in front of him with a cold look and said angrily, do you want to prove it? With that, he released a bit of his king's haki at him, causing the Hyuga to widen his eyes and think. It's the same thing that Hinata-sama released in battle. Can this weakling use it too? Luffy looked at the ground where he was, observing a pool of blood that he knew was Hinata's, and he passed his hand through it before everyone's surprised gaze to show his fist stained with that same blood to Niji while saying, I swear I'll kick your ass in this tournament for hurting Hinata. We'll see which is stronger, your destiny or my guts. Chapter 30. The Preliminaries End. After that impressive battle between the Hyuga cousins, the screen showed the following names to fight. Jinbei vs. Shino. Despite his insect techniques, Fishman karate combined with Jinbei's Suetun jutsus did not allow Shino to achieve victory. After the Fishman's victory, the screen showed the following names. Chopper vs. Kankuro. The poor reindeer had to retreat before Kankuro used his puppet to lock him up since Luffy ordered him to do so he wouldn't get hurt. After that battle, the following fight was the last of the preliminaries. Gaara vs. Lee. Everyone opened their eyes surprised by this revelation and then, Hate shouted. Alright, the last fighters, get down here right now. Sabaku no Gaara and Rock Lee, you're the last ones. Gaara disappeared in a shunshin of sand and reappeared on the battlefield while looking at Lee with murderous eyes. Lee could only clench his fist in excitement and shouted. YOSH, now I can show my flames of youth. Well said, Lee, go forth and shine with your beautiful youth, Guy shouted with a big smile. Guy sensei, Lee shouted, hugging him. Lee, Guy shouted, also hugging him. The two green spandex shinobi were hugging each other, as the famous Radiant Sun Genjutsu formed before them. What the hell is that? Nami shouted, horrified. Ah, my eyes, Sanji shouted, covering himself. But what actin' hell is that thing? Zoro shouted, trying not to see it. It's horrible, was the only thing Robin said normally. After that horrible genjutsu, Lee jumped over the fence to fall before Gaara with a big smile. Yash, I'm excited, he said with a bright smile. Gaara just stood there with his murderous gaze and said, Stop talking and give me your blood like a mother. Lee smiled kindly at him and thus, the last match of the preliminaries began. Lee began to move quickly towards Gaara, with a speed that made it difficult to see him, and Gaara just remained motionless in his place as the sand moved around him stealthily. At this, several of the Mugiwaras were speechless at what they saw. Can you manipulate sand? Usopp asked with his eyes wide open. It's like Crocodile's ability, Nami said, impressed. It's just different. Mr. Zero can control sand since he is also part of that element of nature as a Logia, but Gaara-san can only control it with his thoughts of him, he can't be part of it. But we better keep an eye on his manipulation of sand to see how it works on him, Robin said seriously. Luffy watched the fight between these two to see how the big-browed one would do with a sand manipulator. Lee appeared before Gaara with a kick while shouting, Hello everyone. Gaara remained calm and manipulated the sand in his gourd to grab Lee's leg and send him flying towards the wall, creating a crater with his body. It seems that he has a masterful control with the sand to be able to throw someone with it, said Sanji, watching the fight seriously. Lee just went off the wall with a pirouette and landed in the center of the arena while shouting, I'm fine. Some sweated at his exclamation and Gaara looked at him with cold eyes. Then, Lee launched himself at Gaara with a fast and powerful fist, which the redhead blocked with his sand, and then gave him a kick that the sand also blocked with ease. Lee walked away from the redhead with some frustration and thought, he hasn't moved an inch, shit. Even with how fast Lee is, his attacks can't hit him, Sakura said worriedly. From what I see, the big-browed guy will need all his power to be able to hit him, Luffy said seriously. No physical attack will work against Gaara. The sand moves by itself and serves as a shield. It's a perfect protection. So far no one has managed to do it. No one has ever hurt Gaara, said Kankuro next to them. Everyone looked at him with wide eyes and Nami said, So, Gaara is not the one who actually controls the sand. It is the sand itself that protects him. This goes far beyond that damn sandy thing. Actually, it works both ways. The sand acts of his own will to protect him, but Gaara can also manipulate it. In simple terms, for defense, the sand acts of its own will, but for attack, Gaara must manipulate it to attack, Kankuro explained with a frown. Everyone watched as Lee continued to attack Gaara's sand with several blows, and Sakura asked with concern, "Why are you limiting yourself to attack with taijutsu? Melee attacks are useless, you should attack from a little further away with ninjutsu." "It's not that Lee doesn't want to use ninjutsu," Guy said next to him. Everyone looked at him in amazement at that, and Sanji asked with interest, "Because?" Guy smiled as he looked at his student and said, "It just can't be." "How?" almost everyone shouted in amazement. Guy sighed and began to explain. "Lee was born without being able to channel chakra, so he cannot ninjutsu or genjutsu." "It can't be, then how could it have gotten here?" Sakura screamed in disbelief. "When I met him, Lee was a lost case. He had no talent whatsoever. His only option to live as a ninja was through taijutsu. There aren't many ninjas like him who can't master ninjutsu or genjutsu. Everyone would consider him a failure as a ninja, but," Guy answered with a proud smile. At these words, Sanji looked at Lee with wide eyes, as he never imagined that this young man would have a story similar to his own, that both would be considered failures for not being like the others, and that they had managed to advance thanks to hard work. The sand moved at high speed with the intention of capturing Lee, to which the eyebrowed man only quickly dodged with jumps and agile evasion. The sand moved as if it were hands, always trying to capture Lee, and Gaara remained very calm as he watched how the eyebrowed man jumped towards the stone fingers of the sand. Guy looked at him with a smile and said, "That's why he can win." Then he showed his thumb to his student and shouted with enormous emotion, "Read, release them, you have my permission." Lee looked at him in surprise and shouted, "But Guy-sensei, he told me. He told me not to do it unless I had to defend myself against the simultaneous attack of several enemies." But Guy gave him the thumbs up again, and with a bright smile, he shouted, "Forget what I said, you have my permission." Lee smiled at his teacher's words and immediately began to remove some types of weights from his ankles while everyone watched him in amazement. "Dumbbells? Can that boy seriously be able to overcome Gaara's arena just by taking off a few weights?" Tamari asked without believing it. "You weigh? Wait, Master Guy, do you?" Sanji shouted, staring at the browed master with wide eyes. Lee held his weights in the air and shouted, "Very good, now I can move much more easily." With that, he dropped the weights to the ground, and when they fell, they caused a huge explosion that shook the area. "Guy, you're really overdoing it," Knight and Kakashi thought with a lot of sweat. Guy just smiled and gave a sign to Lee while shouting, "Go ahead, read." Lee smiled excitedly, and in an instant, everyone saw that there was no one in the statue anymore. "I have disappeared," Nami shouted, impressed. Sanji moved his gaze at an incredible speed and could see how Lee moved at a much greater speed than before and threw a direct blow to Gaara's face that he managed to block by a hair. "Awesome! It's faster than before. His speed is comparable to mine and his power is surprising. Is this what someone who has been called a failure has come to, just through hard work?" Sanji thought in wonder. "That was close," Sakura thought in surprise. "How fast?" Luffy thought excitedly. Lee continued to throw punches at the redhead, who continued to block them as best he could with his sand, and Guy continued saying with pure pride, "He does not know how to use ninjutsu or genjutsu. That is precisely why he has invested time, effort, and his entire being in perfecting his taijutsu. So, even though he can't do other types of attacks, he is invincible. A specialist in hand-to-hand combat." Then, everyone saw how Gaara was hit in the face by a kick from Lee, before everyone's astonished gaze. "No one can match Lee's speed of him. He who warns is not a traitor. And I already said that he is strong," Guy said with more pride. Lee stood before Gaara with excitement and shouted, "Okay, now the show begins." Lee then began to move across the field at high speed and then kicked him in the jaw from below, sending him flying. "This is not over," Lee shouted with emotion. He launched a quick succession of kicks at Gaara's face, lifting him further into the air until he was behind the redhead. "So he's going to use that," Luffy thought as he saw it. The bandages on Lee's arms began to surround Gaara until they wrapped him like a top, and then, Lee began to spin with him towards the ground at high speed. Frontal lotus flower, Lee shouted loudly. Both impacted the ground with great power, creating a large crater in the ground, and when the smoke cleared, everyone could see with open eyes how there was a kind of shell of sand in the shape of Gaara. A sand armor? Nami shouted when she saw it. This seriously goes beyond that terrible Shichibukai, Usopp shouted in panic. Lee had landed near him and was looking at him in amazement. Then Guy looked at Lee with a big smile and shouted loudly. Lee, the lotus flower blooms again. Knight looked at him with wide eyes and shouted. You don't want me to use that. What thing? What is he talking about? Sakura asked without understanding. Kakashi could only watch the fight, knowing that he couldn't change the minds of this pair of fools, and said, The 8 body doors, or better known as the hidden lotus flower technique. 8 body gates? What is that? Sanji asked, interested. Knight sighed and asked Guy. Guy, I assume you can open all the doors, right? Guy smiled slyly and said, 5. Kakashi sighed again and Luffy asked them, What are the 8 doors? Guy smiled at the captain and said, We talk about getting rid of limitations, as preparation to execute the hidden lotus flower. There are points in the body where the chakra is concentrated as vital spaces. From the head down, there are 8 gates that limit chakra capacity. The lotus flower is executed by opening the first door called aperture, and by doing so, it releases the restrictions that the brain has. However, it is also a double-edged sword, since if you open the 8 doors, you will have to pay the price with your life. Everyone watched as Lee concentrated deeply and a green aura covered him as his hair rose and he shouted. 3rd open door, door of life. His skin has turned red, and what is that green aura? Sanji shouted, observing everything in amazement. But Lee didn't stop there and concentrated even more as he shouted. 4th door open, wound gate. At that instant, the entire battlefield shook and shattered with large rocks flying into the air. Lee disappeared from his position and launched himself against Gaara to begin hitting him with a speed that no one imagined they would see. Gaara's body rose into the air from the blows and Lee appeared before him to power slam him into the ground. However, he reappeared behind him and hit him again. Thus, he began a rapid succession of blows against the redhead until the dark-eyed man appeared before him with his fist ready and shouting. Let's go for the last one. 5th open door, door of spirituality, Lee shouted furiously. He lunged at Gaara to punch him in the stomach, causing him to vomit blood. He then used his bandages to hold Gaara's body and pull him towards him. Hidden lotus flower, Lee shouted, punching Gaara in the stomach. Both of them fell to the ground, causing a huge explosion that shook the entire place, and everyone had to hold on because of the tremor that shook them. When everything calmed down, they turned their attention to the arena as the sand fell, revealing the result of the battle. When everything became clear, they could see how Lee was getting up from the ground with the last of his strength. He did it, Sanji shouted happily. But then they watched in horror as sand was gathering on one of Lee's arms and one of his legs, while in the sand crater, a furious Gaara was cruelly extending his hand as he said, Sabakaku Arena. Everyone watched in horror as the sand mercilessly smashed Lee's limbs on one side and he fell to the ground, unable to move. Then, they witnessed Gaara sending more sand towards the poor-browed man, and the moment he was about to cover him, it was dispersed by 2 men who were glaring at the redhead. That's enough, Sanji shouted angrily. Gaara glared at Sanji and Guy and asked, Why do they save him? Guy looked at him seriously and just said, He is one of my dear students. Everyone saw this with wide eyes, and Gaara just picked up the sand from his gourd to leave while saying boredly, Bah, it happened. Then Hade coughed and shouted, The winner is Gaara, and with this, the preliminaries of the 3rd test are over. Chapter 31, Training Month. After the Gaara vs. Lee battle, everyone who passed the preliminaries stood before the Hokage seriously. Luffy. Us. Sasuke. Brook. Kankuro. Tent. Shikamaru. Frankie. Robin. Neji. Temari. Zoro. Jinbei, Gaara, Dosu. In total there were 15 finalists, so in total there would be about 7 fights in the final to start, and one would be left out for the next round. Hiruzen looked at them with a smile and Hate said, I congratulate you for passing the 3rd test of the Chunin exam. Well done. Now, the Sandaime will explain to you what you need to know for the final. Hiruzen took a step forward and looked at them all seriously to say, Now, I am going to explain to you what is necessary for the final. They were already told previously that the final will be held in front of the entire world. You are the representatives of your respective countries and you must demonstrate your strength to everyone. So, the test will start in a month. Some people widened their eyes at this and Zoro asked, Shall we not start here and now? Hiruzen looked at him with an amused smile and said, We need this time to make preparations. We will use this time to inform the feudal lords and ninja chiefs of each country of the result of the preliminary selection and invite them to attend the final test. In addition, you will also use this time to prepare. In other words, you will use this time to train and become stronger for the finals. You will use this time to create new cards to face your opponents and to rest, which is very important. Now, we will do something else to prepare for the finals. He looked at Anko, who nodded and took a box to pass it to all the participants. Take just one piece of paper and don't show it to anyone, she said with a smile. Everyone took a piece of paper from the box and looked at what was inside with a serious look. When he reached Luffy, he could see that he got the number 1. Do you each already have one? Now say the number you got in order, starting from the left, Hiruzen said with a smile. The 14th, said Dosu. I have the first one, Luffy said. 13, Gaara said emotionlessly. I have 9, Nami said. I have number 2, Neji said. I have the third one, said Robin. Troublesome, I have 11, Shikamaru said with a dejected expression. I have the 5, said Zoro. Ow, I'm the 7th, said Frankie. I have number 4, Tenten said looking at Robin. I have 8, Jinbei said looking at Frankie with a smile. I have 12, Kankuro said looking at Shikamaru. Yo-ho-ho-ho, I have 6, Brook said looking at Zoro. And I have the 10th, Temari said looking at Nami. Everyone looked at each other seriously and Hiruzen said, Well, in that case, Sasuke-kun has 15. It's time to announce the order of the finals tournament matches. The draw was for that, Nami shouted in disbelief. Show them the diagram, Ibiki, Hiruzen said, looking at the torturer. Yes, sir, Ibiki said with an amused smile. He turned over the cardboard he was holding and on it they could see a diagram showing the order of the fights that would take place. First fight, Monkey D. Luffy Uzumaki vs. Neji Hyuga. Second fight, Robin vs. Tenten. Third fight, Roronoa Zoro vs. Brook. Fourth fight, Frankie vs. Jinbei. Fifth fight, Nami vs. Sabaka no Temari. Hex combat, Shikamaru Nara vs. Sabaka no Kankuro. September battle, Gaara vs. Dosu. Luffy looked at Neji with a frown and thought. And to think I would be playing him. This will be interesting. What a problem. If I could, I would surrender once the fight started, but knowing my mother, she won't let me do it. Shikamaru thought with anxiety. So I get to fight the Sandman's sister in the finals? Well, that could be interesting, Nami thought with a smile. I have to face that brunette who can use some kind of weird clone. Perfect, this way I can be one step closer to my dream, thought Tenten, looking at Robin with a challenge. It's my turn against the Uzumaki. Fate has decided that I will win, Neji thought arrogantly. I will face Brook. I think it will be a good way to entertain myself since we both use different styles of swords. Zoro thought looking at Brook with a smile. I will face Frankie. I have to take care of his technology and use my fishman karate very well. Jinbei thought seriously. So I'll face the orange-haired girl. I guess it's a good way to see how strong he is. Temari thought with a smile. Hiruzen smiled at the excited vibe of each of the finalists and continued to explain the tournament final. Well, you should know that we will do something interesting in the final, and that is that Sasuke-kun will go to the semi-final round and will fight against the winner of the 7th match of the previous round. From now on you can think about strategies, rest or do anything else you want. If you have any questions before concluding this matter, now is the time. Shikamaru raised his hand and said, I have a question, Hokage-sama. Go ahead, Hiruzen told him kindly. The fact that a tournament is being held means that there will only be one winner. Therefore, only one of us will be promoted to Chunin? Shikamaru asked seriously. Hiruzen smiled at that question and replied, Not necessarily. There will be a jury in the test that will observe the fights composed of the Kages, some ninja chiefs, the feudal lords of the countries that commission the missions, and myself. The jury will have the function of evaluating everyone during the tournament, and if we decide that someone is worthy of promotion to Chunin, we will grant him the rank even if he is defeated in combat. Does that mean we can all be promoted? Nami asked, impressed. Exactly. How is it also possible that not everyone can achieve it? Progressing in the tournament is equivalent to earning more points from the jury. Have they understood it? Well, it's over. Good job. See you in a month, Hiruzen said, ending the event. But Knight went to his team with a serious expression and said, Go to the Uzumaki complex. I must tell you about your training this month. Everyone agreed, and with that, they all left to begin their month of training. A while later, at the Uzumaki complex, Luffy and his group of him, made up of his crew of him and Sakura, were in the room of the Uzumaki residence before Knight, who told them seriously, Listen, I can tell that you want me to train you, and I don't see anything wrong with that. However, there is someone else who can train them as well as, and we will look for him in the hot springs. Everyone looked at each other with a drop of sweat, and Sanji asked, And what can we learn in the hot springs? You didn't want to spy on the girls on them, did you? Knight laughed a little at this question and said with a mischievous smile, Don't worry. We'll just go to relax a little and look for his second master there. The girls will enjoy the hot springs on the women's side, so they go to the happy ending, while the guys and I will go to the men's side to talk about their training very seriously while we relax. Are you okay with it? Everyone looked at him with some doubts, and Luffy said, Well, I don't understand why you want to take us to the hot springs instead of training, but we can't deny a little relaxation. You're right. I deserve some relaxation, and a hot spring will do the trick. Let's go to those hot springs, said Nami with a big smile. Knight smiled happily at his team's response and said, Very good, in that case, we will go to some very special hot springs. Meanwhile, at the Konoha hospital, Kakashi was before Sasuke, who looked at him with pure arrogance, and the silver-haired man said, I have been ordered to train you, and I have several techniques that can help you, including one that will help you in case you fight Gaara. Sasuke smiled evilly and said, Well done, Kakashi. You know you must give me all the jutsu you possess, and you must make me stronger. Now come on and train me with all the power you possess. Kakashi sighed at these words and followed the Uchiha while thinking, If it weren't for the promise I made to my partner, I wouldn't heed the advice. But to honor his memory of him, I will swallow my anger and train this arrogant man for the finals. How lucky Knight is. Because he is favored by the law of the first Hokages, he can train whoever he wants. I wonder how he will be training the others. Konoha Hot Springs, men sighed. Knight and the male Mugiwaras were in the hot water, enjoying the extreme relaxation that the water gave them, and the dark sensei said, Ah, this is so relaxing, at least it relieves the stress of work. You're right, sensei. That does a good job of relieving stress. I guess I could come over here from time to rest, Luffy said with a big smile. You're right, Luffy. It's a good idea to take some time to relax in a hot spring. Although I wish there were girls here, Sanji said with some sadness. Yo-ho-ho-ho, I still remember that time when Yamato-san came with us into the Wano baths. It was wonderful, Brooke said excitedly. However, Zoro looked at Knight with a serious expression and said, Sensei, what is the real reason we came here? Knight only turned his gaze to the wooden wall that divided the men's and women's sides to find his target peeking through a hole in the wall. Well, he's the reason we came here, Knight said, pointing at the man. Everyone turned to look at who was talking about, and upon seeing him, their eyes widened. Before them, there was a white-haired man in a red traditional dress with a headband that had the kanji 4 oil on his head, and he was laughing pervertedly as he looked through the hole. Luffy gaped at him. Sanji and Brook were furious that an old pervert was spying on the girls, and Knight stood up from the water to stealthily walk towards the wall while motioning to the others to keep quiet. When she was behind the man, she took a deep breath and then shouted with a loud voice, "A peeper, a pervert is spying on the hot springs from here." The white-haired man glared at him with furious eyes at that, but froze when he instantly recognized him. "Knight?" he said, unable to believe it. However, the wall was destroyed into pieces, and before the three, Nami in her angry mode, looked at the man with murderous eyes. "Pervert, this will cost you 10,000 ryo for each one plus a beating from everyone," she shouted with fury. "Curse, this is worse than Tsunade," the man shouted with his eyes wide open. However, nothing could save him from the cruel beating that the orange-haired woman, accompanied by Hancock and Sakura, began to give him with all the fury they had, all while he was watched by the Mugiwara's men, who looked at him with pity, and by Knight, the one who just smiled and said, "It's good to see you again, Jiraiya." Chapter 32, Meeting Jiraiya, the Perverted Sage. Everyone was looking at the white-haired old man in the male section of the hot springs with a drop of sweat as he lay on the ground with several bruises and blood coming out of his body. "And this is the one who is going to train us?" Zoro asked with annoyance. The white-haired man stood up from the ground in pain and asked, "What was it that hit me?" Knight looked at him with a smile and said, "Come on, Jiraiya, it's not that bad. This can't be worse than the beatings Tsunade gave you." Hearing her voice, Jiraiya looked at him with wide eyes and shouted, "Knight? But what are you doing here?" "I came back a year ago. Remember that I left the night of the Kyuubi attack, and I had made it very clear to you that you had to protect Minato and Kushina's son," Knight said, looking at Jiraiya with cold eyes. The white-haired man could only grunt and said, "It was not my fault. I had to attend to my spy network and I couldn't take care of the child." "What you were doing was writing that stupid cheap pornography in the thermal baths while spying on women," Knight shouted furiously. Hearing this, Nami, Hancock and Sakura covered themselves even more from the white-haired man, and Robin looked at him with murderous eyes. "Hey, don't call it cheap pornography, it's art," Jiraiya shouted furiously. But he felt a tap on his shoulder, and when he looked up, he could see Sanji looking at him with admiration as he asked, "Excuse me, but what kind of art do you write?" Jiraiya smiled at her question and took out an orange book as he said, "Oh, I see there is someone interested in my literary work. Here, young man. This is my first volume, the first of many that I have written." "Ah, it's that orange book that Galena-sensei is always reading," Nami shouted, pointing at the orange book. Sanji took the book in his hands, and when he opened it, he could see before him a golden light that made him shed many tears of emotion. "It's fantastic, it's majestic. I've only read a few words and I can already read the wonderful art in this book. It's a masterpiece, this is poetry." Jiraiya looked at him with a big smile and said with emotion, "Oh yes, this is the fruit of many years of research and sweat. This is my masterpiece, the pinnacle of literature, it's golden words." "Don't eat, Jiraiya. It's just cheap porn, the product of spying on women when they're bathing or naked," Knight said with his eyes rolled back. Jiraiya looked at him with an angry tick, and Nami asked Knight angrily, "Knight-sensei, who the heck is this old pervert?" At this question, Jiraiya slammed his hand on the ground and a smoke screen exploded before them as the white-haired man's voice could be heard saying, "You're wrong. Beautiful before you is the disciple of Mount Myaboku, the amazing toad of the mountains, the hermit Gamma Sennin Jiraiya, the gallant." Everyone could see that there was a huge orange toad in front of them, and on top of it was Jiraiya making a pose very similar to Odin's. Everyone looked at him with a drop of sweat and thought, "Sennin? What is a Sennin?" When the white-haired boy got off the toad, Knight stood beside him and said, "You could have saved yourself that ridiculous presentation." "Shut up, Knight, you're always questioning my way of being. Who are they anyway?" said Jiraiya looking at Luffy's group. "They are my students on Team 7 and they will be your pupils from now on," Knight told him with a big smile. At this, Jiraiya glared at him and shouted, "No way, I would never teach stupid brats like that, and especially not at the request of someone who doesn't appreciate my work. Work my ass, you only write cheat porn by spying on women. Do you know that at your age that is a crime of perversion?" Knight shouted at him furiously. "Idiot, I'm not just any pervert, I'm an artist looking for inspiration," Jiraiya yelled back. Knight gritted his teeth at her chatter and said, "Now I understand why Tsunade can't stand you. Anyway, you'll train these kids in the shinobi arts whether you want to or not. I already told you I won't do it. I don't like brats like them, and I'm not into men, maybe those beauties. But never those idiots," Jiraiya shouted furiously. Hearing this, Nami clicked her tongue and said, "This idiot is like Sanji with his preference for women. Luffy, it's time to use that with the seduction classes I taught you." Luffy nodded and made a sign with his hands while Jiraiya continued to fight with Knight, while saying, "I'm a Sannin hermit, not an idiot who lets himself be entangled by a stupid person who has the favor of the Hokage. It's because I don't like you even though you're my friend." But a screen of smoke attracted both their attention, and before a surprised Jiraiya was a beautiful girl with black, gold and red hair tied in 2 pigtails and with smoke covering her nakedness while she winked at the white-haired man and said, "What if I do this?" "My beautiful Lai Zichuan has appeared," Senji shouted with a nosebleed. "Yu Jiraiya shouted with a perverted face and showing his thumbs. "They are idiots." Luffy and Nami thought at the same time. "This body is exactly my type," Jiraiya shouted, staring pervertedly at every inch of Lai Zi. "I think the same. Lai Zichuan has the exact measurements for the woman of my dreams," said Sanji, doing the same as Jiraiya. Lai Zi looked at them both with fear, while Jiraiya asked her with excitement, "What is that technique that you have used? Come on, tell me." "It's the Hexi Jutsu, Grandmaster. It is a technique with which the beautiful Lai Zichuan appears before us in all her glory, a woman like every man desires, without any imperfection and with the greatest beauty that can exist," said Sanji, looking at Lai Zi with a creepy, perverted look. "Oh, good idea, you're a genius," Kid Jiraiya said to Sanji happily. "Hey, the one who created the technique was me," Lai Zi thought with a drop of sweat. "Man, everyone falls like flies before this technique," Nami thought too much with a drop of sweat. Then, Lai Zi looked at Jiraiya with shining eyes and making a cute girl pose, she asked him, "So, will you help us train?" "Well done, Luffy. That never fails with perverts," thought Nami with an evil smile. What could Nami have taught Luffy to make him perform such arts of female seduction? Knight thought with a drop of sweat. Jiraiya and Sanji looked at Lai Zi with faces full of perverse desire, and Jiraiya said, "Of course, on one condition." This worried everyone, especially Nami and the other girls, while Lai Zi asked, still with that cute pose, "What condition is that?" Jiraiya and Sanji looked at each other with a mutual nod and said at the same time with their purest perversion, "Maintain that form throughout the training." At this, Luffy dispelled the jutsu and Nami shouted furiously, "No way, you're just a bucking perverted old man, and you Sanji-kun, stop actually harassing poor Luffy." "You're wrong, young lady. I'm not a perverted old man," Jiraiya said normally. "Well, you seem like it," Nami yelled at him with more fury. "I am the king of perverts," Jiraiya declared with too much pride. "Shit, this guy surpasses even Sanji-kun," Nami thought with a drop of sweat. "Master," Sanji shouted, kneeling before him. Knight sighed at his perverted friend's antics, and then Jiraiya changed to a serious expression as he asked, "Joking aside, Knight, can you tell me who they really are? I can tell that they are strong, in a sense far from what ninjas are, but strong." Knight smiled as he finally had the Jiraiya Sannin and said seriously, "Well, do you remember that in the Kyuubi attack, I told you who the son that Minato and Kushina had really was?" "Yes, you told me that he came from another world and that he was reincarnated as his son. Why do you tell me that?" Jiraiya asked, unable to understand. Knight stood behind Luffy and said, "Why are you watching it right now?" Jiraiya looked at Luffy with wide eyes and shouted, "Is this boy that baby? It seems different." He, that's because I modified his body to what it was before. You know that I am a real god since you are one of the few people I told my true identity along with Hashirama, Tobirama, Mito, Minato, Kushina, Tsunade and Hiruzen. Well, you are looking at Monkey D. Luffy, now Uzumaki, with his crew of the Mugiwaras from another world," said Knight, pointing at the crew with their captain. Jiraiya looked at them in amazement and said, "Wow, when you told me that the baby was from another world, I never thought that things would get to such a point of being faced by people from that world. And can I know what kind of world it is?" Knight smiled and began to tell him what life was like for the Mugiwaras in their world until Luffy's death on that occasion. When she finished, Jiraiya had clear surprise on her face and said, "Amazing, they really have lived through many adventures, but why do you want me to teach them? With all their experience and strength from that world, these boys should be able to face any ninja from here." Knight sighed at the white-haired man's words and said seriously, "That may be so, but their knowledge of chakra and jutsus from this world will be necessary for their stay here. For that reason, they need the best teacher who can teach them everything they need about this world, and I don't think there is anyone better than you to do it." Jiraiya scratched the back of his neck in embarrassment at those words, and Nami shouted furiously, "Knight-sensei, is that old pervert really the only one who can train us in the ninja knowledge of this world?" Jiraiya became depressed that a beautiful young woman would say that about him, and Knight just smiled slyly as he said, "Nami, it could be a perverted and stupid old man who makes them embarrassed. But I assure you that there is no better teacher than him in this world, trust me." The Mugiwaras looked at him with some doubt at those words, wondering if it was a good idea to have a pervert train them. Knight looked at Jiraiya seriously and said, "Well, it's already very late, so we'll wait until tomorrow to start training. Is it okay if we meet at the Uzumaki complex to begin training?" Jiraiya agreed and began to leave while saying, "That will be the best. I'll see you there for training." When he left, Knight looked at the Mugiwaras and said seriously, "Let's go back to the complex and rest. They will need the rest because the training will be very hard." Everyone agreed, and with that, they returned to the Uzumaki complex to rest for the day. Elsewhere in the Land of Fire, a certain busted blonde was in a casino while making her bets, when two people appeared before her, and the black-haired woman said seriously, "That's enough, teacher, she has played too much today and we still have to continue our journey." The busted blonde just looked at her with a bad face and said, "You're a party pooper. He was about to make a good play this time until you arrived. You know that you will never be able to win anything, and the few times that you do, it is because something bad happens." The now angry black-haired woman shouted at him. The blonde clicked her tongue at that comment, but then she looked at the second person with a sly smile and said, "How about you take my place? With your blessed luck, we can get something for the trip." The second person just glared at her and sat down where the busted blonde had been. Her beautiful blonde hair and two pigtails and distinctive whiskey marks on her face made her very peculiar.
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown and left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.